Tonight on Elvis Book Club.
Elvis cruised the bars that had become his home away from home, intent on finding a woman to dominate and control, needing to regain the potency his mother had sucked out of him.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, welcome to Elvis Book Club. I'm here talking with my good friend Pat. Hey, Pat.
Hey, Brad.
This week, we read The Boy Who Would Be King, an intimate portrait of Elvis Presley by his cousin. It's a story of family ties, boners, and a very emotional Elvis, all told by a narrator who is quite possibly entirely unreliable. That narrator is Earl Greenwood, our titular cousin, who, newsflash, is maybe not a cousin, or even someone who knew Elvis. So, Pat, let's talk Earl. What do you think of this character?
I'm divided. At first, I started out and I was convinced it was all just a load of crap, but I think by the end, I warmed up to the dude. He gets off to a rough start at the beginning for me because I'm talking about his motivations for doing it, and he's just not sure if he should write this book, but he does. Here we are reading it.
He fought through that.
Yeah. All the books I've read about Elvis, I don't know if people say that explicitly every time, but there's definitely something to that with every one of these books. Oh, I'm not sure. I was never sure about this. Elvis was a very close personal friend of mine, and I treasure his memory so much. And here's some stories about him.
Yeah. Did you hear about his dick? We should backtrack a little bit. We chose this book to be our first episode because in my hazy memory, I'd read this freshman year of college. I remember this being what I would consider a quintessential Elvis book, in that might be a bunch of horseshit. It's sleazy, and it's written by a person who claims to be Elvis's closest confidant.
Yes.
Right? And yet no one else has really heard of him.
Right.
So all of that we find in the intro, which is completely boilerplate, I would say. He sets his bona fides. I grew up with Elvis. We were like brothers, he says at one point. They trash other books, other authors, because obviously everyone else is kind of just in for a quick buck.
Right.
Saying, as you said, I do not want to hurt Elvis. The last thing in my mind, this isn't about hurting Elvis. But there's such a thing as honesty and the pressing need to have the honest truth about Elvis.
Well, and this book, like others that I've read, it's the justification. Some part of that is always, it's what Elvis would have wanted. Like
Right.
Elvis would want the fans to know the truth. And I don't know, like some of the details in this book, I bet he wouldn't want people to know that.
Yeah. Earl, make sure they knew I had a zitty back.
Yeah, I had to have warts burned off my hands.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, speaking to his bona fides here, it's right on the cover here. It says 32 pages of family photos.
Right.
And there are definitely 32 pages of photos. I believe there are maybe 2 pictures that include Earl.
Yes.
And there might be a couple that were taken by Earl that seem pretty candid, but the rest are stock. For a guy claiming to be so like a brother to Elvis, certainly didn't treasure the photographs too well.
Yeah, for someone who, for decades, from earliest childhood all the way through 60s, there's only 2 photos.
Yes.
Neither are like candid, like inside a house. They all have that feel of Earl was hanging out by the gate.
Yeah.
So that's pretty suspect. Also, like, and this is very common, I find in these books, is that he lays the impetus for writing it outside of him. It's always, I've waited 20 years to write this book, and I never would have, but the fans demand it. Or the family demands it. There's nothing internal, no internal drive, and certainly nothing like venal. There's no desire for reward. It's strictly to serve these other people who are making these demands.
Yes.
Like, you got to tell your story, Earl. Like, no one knows the real Elvis.
Right.
As with most of these books, he opens up with the death of Elvis, and he gets the call, right?
Yeah.
And he's one of the first people they call.
Oh, yeah. We need you, Earl.
So he flies back from L.A. to Memphis. They usher him through the crowds, the throngs of the mourners by the gates, get him into the house. People are glad he's there. And he is immediately disturbed to find members of the Memphis Mafia literally fighting over jewelry. I just picture there's like a pile of jewelry on a very long white like Persian rug, and they're just clawing at with each other.
Well, I think he talks about later on in the book, Elvis not being that mindful of money and valuables. And he talks about there being like jewelry strewn about Elvis's room that's been like tromped on and stuff.
Yeah.
So I could also see those guys just like butts up in the air, like trying to get under the couch. There's a tennis bracelet under there, Charlie. This is a loose ruby.
So in our reading, obviously, as we're saying, there's We have questions about the veracity of all this. There's a lot that lends credibility to what he's saying, I would say, in his telling.
But I think we're not the only one with questions. Is that
That would be
questions about that?
Yeah. So I did a very little bit of Googling on this. I'm not going to call it research. And immediately came across a guy called Bill Burke, who is I think he's the owner and publisher of the Elvis Information Network.
Okay.
Which is a pretty sweet site. It's basically a website that apparently it doesn't look to have been updated since like 2004.
I hope Mr. Burke's still with us.
I do too, because he seems like a class act. He's also an Elvis author, I think, at that time. So that would have been 2004. He claims to have written, I think he's like 13 books or something. And he claims to be like the real factual dude, like primary research. He's talking to the family, talking to the friends. He's not getting it from other books. And he has great disdain for people who do not do his level of research. So he has some really interesting things to say. The main hit is that Earl claims to be a family member by saying his grandfather, Tom Greenwood, married Elvis's aunt, Vernon's sister, Dixie Presley. And Bill Burke drops the pretty significant bombshell that there is no Dixie Presley.
What?
So it's interesting. As far as you look at the Elvis family trees, no Dixie there. Now, Earl's claim is that Dixie developed syphilis at an early age, and as was the style at the time, they basically locked her away, sent her away. She got very sick. She kind of lost her mind, as syphilis will do. And the family thereafter never spoke of her, would not acknowledge her, because there was such shame around that.
And that makes sense to me. Within this book, there's lots of, it really does feel like at least the Presley family or the Greenwood part, what other people think of their family is foremost in their mind often. It seems to be a motivating factor for Elvis. So that makes sense to me.
You buy that?
I do. I can see the case for it, for sure.
It's an interesting claim, for sure. By Earl's telling, she's like literally like chained in the attic.
All right. They're feeding her fish heads and yeah.
Yeah. But that's the main vibe of the book. Like it's definitely a question. There's stuff that feels very accurate and real, and there's stuff that is very questionable. But let's dive deeper in, and we'll see if we come to any firmer conclusions.
Okay.
So as we said, it's family ties, boners, and emotional Elvis.
Yes.
This is a much different Gladys than we've been presented with before.
And I have to say, I don't know why, this is a really refreshing look at Gladys for me, because she is, I don't know if she's handled with kid gloves in other portrayals of her, or she's deified by Elvis. I think that's true, but you definitely get the other side of the coin here. Like, as much as he loved her, I think he also resented her. Yeah. Definitely seeing that here.
Yeah, you say refreshing, and I agree, it's so different. But I would not say refreshing because it's so dark. It's depressing to me.
I see that, but I'm so put off by the notion that Elvis loved his mama so much when it's just underscored here about how fucking worthless his family is. So I don't understand why that isn't hit upon more in other books. Everybody just seems to think, oh, Elvis's mom was a really loving woman who sacrificed everything for Elvis. And I guess she did, but she definitely exacted a price along with that. And I just put myself in Elvis's shoes, and man, having to come home to that would be rough. She kind of stymied him when it came to girlfriends and stuff like that. She's walking him to school well into his teenage years. Ugh. It's yucky.
I would say, you say she sacrificed everything, but there's clearly not much to sacrifice.
That's true.
In that family. There are plenty of stories of her being very giving in this, but correct in that, whereas in other books, she is only a giver and like a protector, and she loves Elvis, and it's very like pure. In this, it is very like manipulative.
Yes.
And she is very passive aggressive, like an emotional drain on Elvis.
Yes.
She's not feeding him as much.
They talk about her not being able to like stay in a job for very long. And I don't know if that's because she's sickly or if it's because she's a drunk. The way Earl paints it, the Vernon and Gladys and Elvis and really the Presley side of his family are like the lowest of low, like the trashiest of white trash in Tupelo, wherever they live. So I don't know. I want to see Gladys trying a little harder before I turn her into a saint.
I'll say this, like you put it really well in here. Actually, when I looked at your notes, I highlighted this. that both Gladys and Vernon are a couple of albatrosses around his neck, laying on the guilt, relying on him to supply the resources and meaning in their lives. The meaning part is really astute, I would say.
Oh.
Like, because that is this weight she puts on Elvis.
Yeah.
Earl goes into a pretty clever bit. Clever in that I think it feels very true. It's like emotionally intelligent about Gladys and Vernon still having physical relationship.
Yeah.
And yet she would then immediately turn to Elvis for all her emotional needs.
Yep.
Which you can see being very awkward.
And if you think about it, they're living in such close quarters. I think it makes it all the more awkward.
And literally they're in bed and he's on the couch in the front.
Yeah.
In the one-room shack, basically. So there's her turning to him for the emotional intimacy. And then they talk about him sharing their bed in two different contexts. And this is a quote. He says, "As an infant and toddler, Elvis shared his parents' bed. Later, when he moved to the couch of the one-room shack, he was still privy to their sexual relationship." And the suggestion there is that they were having sex while infant/toddler Elvis was on the bed. The still, right?
Oh, yes.
So you think of him like swaddled and just bouncing off this mattress and getting kneed in the head, right? Undoubtedly a small mattress. Like they're not heavy. It's no California King.
Right.
And then when Vernon gets thrown in the clink, Elvis, of course, sleeps with Gladys. Mm-hmm. And then when Vernon comes back, Elvis is uprooted from that privileged spot.
Yeah.
All of this feeding into this intense Oedipal thing. And you mix that in with Vernon's ways and inability or disinterest in providing. And so there's all this resentment that builds up in Elvis towards Vernon.
Yeah. And again, I think the close quarters comes into that. Like everybody's observing that in the house. So Vernon is observing Gladys fawning over Elvis. Yeah. Elvis is observing them getting it on. So it's just
pressure cooker.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I've never heard that angle taken in any discussion of Elvis's formative years. But yeah, he grew up just watching his parents fornicate. From other Elvis books you've read, have you ever seen Gladys portrayed as such an out-and-out problem alcoholic?
It's been a long time since I've read any of the Guralnick books, which I think is I trust those books. I don't think I've ever seen Gladys focused on before like this, actually talking about her as more than a mom. So to see her portrayed as an alcoholic, it makes sense to me.
I had never thought anything about her as a drinker ever, but I will say the portrait he paints, there's an internal logic to it. And her overwrought attachment to Elvis it makes sense that it would be driven by her drinking and stuff.
I think previously I've just seen her portrayed as kind of sickly. And we'll just leave it at that. So this makes sense. Here's why she's sickly. And it's not, I don't know, it's of her own doing, I guess. But then I also you can't blame her because she's not out working. Maybe she's not out working because she drinks, or is she drinking because she's not out working? I mean, I don't know how you'd argue that, but I don't know. She's confined to that house. All she's got is Elvis. And then if Elvis isn't around and Vernon's in jail or whatever, she needs a release sometime. So it makes sense to me that she would have a drink every now and then.
Every couple hours.
Yeah.
A lot of this overwrought attachment, definitely her walking Elvis to school is very strange. She does that. This is through sophomore year in high school.
Yeah.
Before Elvis says anything. And do you remember the compromise they come to?
She's got to follow him at a distance, right?
Yeah. So She had been walking him to school through sophomore year of high school. And then, Elvis finally speaks up for himself. So she follows him a block behind.
And she really puts up kind of a fight about that too. She doesn't get it.
In this book, that's her constant MO. She immediately goes into guilt and how painful that is, but then says, I love you too much. Do whatever you need to do. Don't worry about poor old Gladys kind of deal, right? Just tearing the heart out of this young kid.
Even though you know it'll kill me, go ahead and do what you need to do.
Yeah, you're more important. I love you too much. Her walking and her feet are very interesting. Her feet come up a couple times in this book, I think in interesting ways. There is one anecdote that I've never heard that is a point in her favor, I guess, even though it seems like an insane one. And the point being that they were so poverty-stricken that whatever money they had to go to baby Elvis. And so she couldn't afford her own shoes. Mm-hmm. So she would instead walk around town wearing 2 or 3 pairs of socks.
Yeah.
Which would mortify Elvis, of course.
Yep.
And you think, if that's true, is that the action of a giving, magnanimous mother, or are those the actions of a trouble alcoholic who is shoveling around town in socks? How are you saving money? Well, the socks are going to have holes within 5 blocks. So even if she's got 2 or 3, she's burning through, she's going through socks at this alarming rate.
But I also don't see Gladys as a person who does a whole lot of walking either.
Good point.
She doesn't seem like the most active, healthy mom.
I would say also an interesting story is that when Elvis first makes money from singing, he gets his first bit of cash to splurge. He buys Gladys this really nice pair of shoes that she can't wear because her feet are too swollen.
So he does that later on too, right? Like he makes big money. I don't know if it's the RCA deal or something before that. And he buys her he buys her a car and she can't drive.
Right.
So like,
Yeah.
it's all like these expensive symbols of Elvis providing for his mom.
That's interesting. And both are not only symbols of wealth, but symbols of mobility, which she can't take part of, right?
And in both cases, aren't they pretty like ostentatious? Like it kind of makes a point of these shoes are pretty like fancy and she'll probably never wear them, but I want to give mama the best. And I think the first car he got her was a Cadillac, I'm sure, but certainly there were other probably cheaper, more utilitarian options, but
Not Elvis's style.
no, not at all.
No. Elvis never bought a woman a pair of flats.
No.
Yeah, I just love, there's something about the swollen feet that it's like this dark reverse fairy tale, you know?
Yeah.
Like you're Prince Charming and they get these nice shoes, but the feet are just like grotesque and pink and swollen. Not to knock her, the woman's passed. I don't want to, honestly, I felt bad.
Kind of an easy target.
Yeah. And I'm sure she's a very good woman, but she's not a 2020 gal who went to college.
And I guess my frustration with Gladys is not so much with Gladys as it is with how she's been portrayed. Like she's a saint, she's a martyr.
I totally agree. And this portrait of her as a much more troubled woman, I don't know that I completely buy, but it certainly points in a direction that feels a lot realer.
Yes.
And as I said, it makes emotional sense, psychological sense.
Yeah. I mean, if Elvis is kind of a nut job later on, if Elvis is a troubled dude, she's got some responsibility in that as well.
And the idea that her love is at least partially tainted by self-interest and her troubles with the bottle and that kind of thing. And at the same time, Elvis's then response to that is love that's also troubled and it feels suffocated. That's, as we know, that's how life works, as opposed to the standard story, which is she has this pure, benevolent love, which Elvis returns.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
So I buy it. It's uncomfortable to buy it as deeply as the depths that Earl goes here.
Yep.
Is not pleasant.
No.
So she gets sick. You do say he has all these troubles with his family, and yet he never lived alone, which is really shocking. I never really thought about that before, but he gets his first taste of money and freedom and we'll see girls. And he's not like, oh, I'll get my parents a nice place and I'll get myself a nice place.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll get us all this nice place.
Yep.
It seems crazy, right? It certainly could be that he wished to, but that was another guilt trip from Gladys, or he preemptively knew that he would never be able emotionally to do that to her.
Yeah.
That could be. Also, I do think back in those days, it was very uncommon for people to move out of home.
Yeah.
You would move out when you got married.
Right.
So I remember like my grandfather, when he moved to Chicago from Iowa, he moved to a boarding house because there was a woman there who would do his cooking and clean and all that, because it was back in the day when men literally did not know how to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So I could see that too. It just wasn't part of the culture. It never even crossed his mind, right? And, he goes so far as he not only takes them to basic training with him, he takes the whole family down to Texas for basic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, so the Gladys thing, there's a big point in this too that Elvis feels when he meets Priscilla, that she's the living embodiment of the dead Gladys, right?
So creepy.
That's not how you felt about your wife?
No. No. Oh, man. No.
It kind of makes some sense that Priscilla was put on a pedestal and was sort of a porcelain doll for Elvis.
Yeah.
And in Earl's book, they don't seem to have much of a sexual relationship.
Right.
The impetus for that being that Gladys' soul is in there, basically, right?
Right.
And he doesn't want to be poking.
Don't they even say at some point that like he's so struck by how much of a resemblance there is like between Priscilla and old photos of Gladys?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly. He marries her. She's Gladys's living embodiment. But then he doesn't seem really comfortable with having sexual relationships with her. So he continues to carouse.
Yes.
You're right?
He expects her to fill that Gladys role. And as far as like Gladys was trapped in their little house or whatever. So Priscilla is expected to stay home and like make a good home for him and be there and provide comfort when he gets home. And she's not expected to have a life outside of Graceland or Elvis.
He does very much put her into, yeah, you're right, a very similar role that Gladys was put into.
But Priscilla chooses karate instructors over drink.
She does. One fun element, maybe the only fun element of Gladys's alcoholism, is that she would eat big chunks of onion to disguise her alcohol breath.
The lady walking down the street with socks on her shoes, and she smells like onions.
Her son's walking a block ahead of her.
You definitely wouldn't look at that lady and say like, what a good mom.
Yeah, so embarrassing.
She's fucking crazy.
Yeah, the more I think about the socks thing, it's really, that seems like a retroactive explanation. Like, oh, she didn't have money for her shoes. All the money went to Elvis because she loved Elvis so much.
Yeah. Man, and her feet were just like so swollen and nasty.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yellow toenails.
Yeah. Well, rest in peace. So let's move into a little Vernon talk. As we kind of touched on, Elvis seems very angry at Vernon from the beginning. There's a lot of Oedipal resentment there. All that feels very accurate to me. Like, that all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't feel outside of the standard story. Like, I don't think anyone has claimed. Did Vernon ever write a book?
I don't believe so. I mean, why would he? He was plenty taken care of after Elvis died, I'm sure. So there's no need for him to write a book.
Yeah.
I would think. Plus, I just don't see him wanting to put in the work.
Yeah. I mean, by write, I meant dictate.
Yeah.
Or pay someone to write a book
Yeah.
claiming that he wrote it. Yeah, I think the only reason to write a book would be to claim he had a better relationship than he did. Because the story that everyone else tells is that, like, really no one liked him very much. Like, his whole family sort of disowned him. I had always heard the story of him bouncing a check, which I guess he stole a check from his employer and wrote it and got caught, of course. But I did not know he also got pinched for running a still.
Yeah. Is that what he went to jail for or prison? Was it for the still or for the check? I'm hazy already.
He went to prison for the check.
Okay.
Because when they got him for the still,
that's right.
Sheriff,
they booted him out of town pretty much.
Well, they gave him the option. Yeah, it was either jail or leave Tupelo.
Right.
Which I don't know that I'd ever heard that. Like, he got run out of town.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting as we read more books to see if the still comes up more. It feels like that would be the story people would tell other than the check. The check feels so like kind of namby-pamby and almost like urban. Mm-hmm. But if you're telling the story of Elvis coming up from nothing, hayseed, rural world, his dad getting pinched for running a still is like, if you're telling the story, this rags to riches story of Elvis, then Vernon getting arrested for running a still fits in a lot better than him bouncing a check.
Yeah.
And so you would think if this was actually happened, that would be the story people would lean on.
Well, I feel like I've heard other stories of Vernon too. Like, didn't he get in trouble for stealing a pig or something like that? Like, I feel like he stole a pig and then bought a hat and got in trouble for that. But maybe I've got that wrong. But I was surprised not to see mention of a pig. But Vernon I see as more as like a petty criminal.
The relationship with Vernon is pretty icy throughout the entire book.
Yes.
And it turns into, I don't even know what you would call it, like dry ice levels of coldness when he marries Dee.
Yes.
Who, it makes sense to me that a second wife or second husband would not hit it off with the kids.
Yeah.
And it's kind of to be expected. Mm-hmm. It is not the norm to have such rage and hatred towards the woman.
But Elvis is in a position also where he's not a 14-year-old kid who's like dealing with his stepmom, right? He's the guy at the top of the totem pole. He's the breadwinner for his dad. And he definitely feels like he has the right to act out, I think, in that position. So his dad is not in a position to tell Elvis, like, you need to respect me because you live under my house and you play by my rules. Like, that's not happening at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just underscores his resentment of his dad. I don't think there's anyone at any time that Elvis is going to be okay with marrying his dad.
Yeah. He did meet Dee in Germany. So it was within 2 years of her death. And he's been living with Elvis the whole time. It does seem a little tight in terms of the time frame.
Yeah, but Earl seems to make it pretty clear that Gladys and Vernon, their relationship was one of sort of, they made their bed, they had to lie in it, basically. They were bound to one another because of Elvis and just because of their circumstances. It wasn't a super romantic. And as much as I'm not a fan of Vernon, Earl describes Vernon's relationship with Dee as like, it sounds like they were really in love. It sounds like Vernon was a pretty charming guy.
Yeah.
This woman was married to some kind of army officer. So she wasn't
Sergeant.
just like, she wasn't just some bar chick. They really hit it off. And it sounded like they were really in love. So like,
Yeah.
good. Vernon is, again, like such a doofus. Like, I don't know. It sounded sweet. And as much as that as Vernon can be sweet.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. He also paints Vernon as, at the beginning of the book, he just seems like he's barely a presence. And he's kind of a dope. But every time he speaks up throughout maybe pretty much past Gladys passing, he makes a lot of sense. Like, he's the sensible one, while Elvis is just the Tasmanian devil.
Well, it is sensible in that his sense, though, seems to be relegated to like economics. It usually seems about like, boy, Elvis, we don't really need, do you need to spend all that money on this or that? And like, you really should listen to the Colonel because he's going to make you the most money.
Yeah.
I don't see Vernon taking up for Elvis's mental health or just like, hey, Elvis, you're my son. I want you to be happy. What makes you happy?
Yeah.
He's not interested in that.
Yeah, he's not doing much fatherly stuff. But yeah, he is. I guess you're right. I took it as sense, but he's really just being conservative and safe with Elvis's money.
Yeah. Because it mentions in the book, Earl mentions in the book that I think this was like right after the RCA deal. Both Vernon and Gladys stopped working.
Yes.
Like
officially. I mean, they hadn't worked.
I don't
much
think they were doing
day.
much working up to that point, but like they decided to retire after that.
Officially retired. Yeah. So then I would say the last member of the family, possibly the most impactful, Jesse Guerin.
Yes.
I would say for a dead baby.
Yeah,
he really gets
stillborn
around.
Child. Wow.
What an influence.
Definitely.
Like, he is the heart of that family, I would say. Gladys brings him up constantly. Elvis, he apparently is always in Elvis's thoughts.
Yes.
He prays to him.
Yep.
You know.
They make a point of, after Gladys dies, I guess Elvis is really sullen at the service. And it sounds like his faith in God is shaken. And he says, from then on, I will only pray to Gladys and to Jesse. He's not praying to God anymore.
That is harsh.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. That's really that's a bad move. But Jesse really functions as a very sharp tool in Gladys's manipulative.
That's exactly what I was
bag.
going to say.
She says something, quote, Jesse wouldn't treat his mama in this bad way. Like, hearing that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine growing up hearing that? Every time you do something your mom doesn't like, your drunken mother, her enormous feet.
It smells like onions.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would do a big number on you.
Yeah. I have this picture of like the ghost of this little like Elvis like floating in the household. Just like there to both inspire and to scare Elvis.
I thought it was weirdly charming that when Elvis decided he wanted to visit Jesse's grave, this was after Gladys passed, and Vernon didn't remember where they buried him.
Yeah, I know. In an unmarked grave. And he was so mad at his dad. Like, how can you not know that?
It is a lapse, I would
Yeah.
say. You would think that would be fairly burned into your mind. But also, like, I don't know, do they? I guess they do. I'm trying to remember, like, they didn't, like, give him the fetus. Like, all right, you can go bury this. Like,
No.
the hospital would take care of it.
Well, was there a hospital? Or was he just like born at home?
Yeah, they don't go into that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Jesse's a huge figure for Gladys and Elvis.
Yeah.
I'm guessing maybe not so much for Vernon.
Vernon's like, on to the next.
Yeah.
I would like to know where he was buried, because, like, the idea of them having to bury their own kid is horrible.
Yeah.
And you would think you would certainly remember.
But as far as Vernon goes, I could see like, oh yeah, my wife had a baby today, and I got to take this trash out.
Yeah. That was kind of what I was just thinking. Like, maybe he couldn't remember where they buried it because it was a deal where, like, Vernon, go bury the baby. He's like, yeah, I'll take care of it. And literally just hucks it out the window into the woods.
But I've got a couple of kids, and like that would be terrible to have like a stillborn twin. But I think my focus would be on the baby that lived. So like, yeah, doc, do what you need to do. I got a mouth I got to feed here.
Yeah. We'll have to keep our eyes out for that. Like find the circumstances of the birth and maybe get some more info on that. Let's talk boners.
Yeah.
The second main theme of this book, behind family ties.
It's juicy stuff. This is really the good part of this book.
Juicy's a gross way to put it.
Yeah.
We should just dive in.
Yeah. Do we need to lay any towels down?
What's the main takeaway you get about Elvis's sexuality from this book?
He was definitely very much into the physical side of sex. Like I think in the past, I'd viewed Elvis as a tender romantic. I'd always thought of him, I'd idealized him as a real gentleman, and he is not a gentleman so much. I don't know. I don't want to paint too unkind a picture of Elvis, but he likes to get down, and the term sex as a weapon comes up a lot in this book.
Yeah.
So
he definitely gets down. And I would not say you are painting him in a bad way. Like you are simply reporting the findings of this book.
yeah, he's definitely, he has appetites. Let's put it that way. Like,
Yeah.
and somehow in the telling of this, like it's racy stuff. It's pretty lurid, but I don't fault him too much either.
Why is that?
I don't know. I guess it's just like I'm always going to come down on the side of Elvis when it comes to this stuff. And like, I just see Elvis as kind of like a bored dude who needed something to do. And this was it.
Preying on women was his choice.
Yeah, but praying with willing participants for the most part, wouldn't you say?
I would say exclusively. I mean, I don't think you need to qualify that.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm coming from with I can't come down too hard on him.
Yeah, I mean, he's not raping women. You know,
Yeah.
But I wouldn't hesitate to say he's not acting in a gentlemanly fashion.
No, that's for sure. He's definitely not.
I think that's fair.
But he's not a complete scoundrel either, I don't think.
Well, I don't know, actually. I mean, his relationships with women, this book paints them as being primarily resentment-based.
Yes.
Like, his sexuality comes from anger,
Yes.
almost exclusively, right?
As it's told in this book, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost exclusively. I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's like the extension of this lifetime of disadvantage and feeling ashamed for being poor and being something of an outcast.
Yes.
He really is like the cruel star. He's the conniving seventh grader. Like one of these days, all these girls will want me, and I'll show them.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of I'll show them.
Yeah, we've got quotes here, which we can get into. Let me jump into a couple. Quote number 1 from page 133 for those following along. For someone who slept with a couple girls a week, Elvis was still shy around proper girls who couldn't be dismissed as mattresses. Sex became a great equalizer for Elvis. He felt inferior around most girls, especially those with any kind of breeding, unless he'd conquered them in the bedroom, proving their cheapness and his superiority. As he got older, knocking good girls off their pedestals became a favorite pastime, and every time he succeeded in doing it, his disillusionment with women grew.
Okay, I feel like I want to walk back some of my earlier statements.
Just thinking about
I don't know. That's the behavior of a scoundrel.
it's scoundrelly behavior, possibly, but depending on how empathetic you want to be, you could see that as coming out of a hurt person.
Right.
Like a
in
victim
a way
of
he
their own.
can't help it.
Yeah. He's a damaged, pained person. He's lashing out
Right.
with his penis at the women of Memphis and then the nation.
And the South.
Thankfully, they
general.
didn't do international touring.
Oh man, can you imagine?
Bunch of sad French chicks, right?
Yeah.
Here's another couple quick quotes. And this is there was a woman kind of hitting on him in some bar from page 153. Like a lot of women he met, she was attracted to the performer with little interest in the man. Elvis resented it, even if he was using them in a similar way, but not enough to walk away. He'd get even later when they were alone.
Man.
That is dark.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the worst kid in the fraternity, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone else is doing bad stuff, but he has this angry core to his ungentlemanly, as you would put it, behavior. I was thinking about this casually over the week, that there have to be literally thousands of articles of clothing out there with Elvis's dried semen on them, right? Because how many of these women would ever wash that? If you're in the late 50s and Elvis bangs you in the back of his car and he sprays all over your poodle skirt or your sweater, your Angora sweater, like,
Right.
Are you washing that?
I don't know. I don't know how girls felt about bodily fluids back then, I guess.
Yeah, you think girls don't have that retention instinct?
Girls are a lot less gross than guys when it comes to that kind of stuff.
I don't know, dude.
No?
If I'm to believe the 80s representation of the 50s, it seemed very common that women would be like, I'm never going to wash his hand again.
Yeah, but I guess sweat and
A batch.
yeah.
Well, I don't know, just a theory. So not only is he going out using his penis as a sword, taking down great wheat fields of women, knocking them off their pedestals, he's also into young gals, which I don't think is probably any great shock to anyone.
No, but then I think as time passes, the verdict around that, like, I don't know, as attitudes change, I mean, there are all the early rock and roll songs about, you're 16.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
beautiful and, teenage love.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know what you're saying, though also I would, in my mind, a lot of those songs, I'm sure you know this, obviously, so many of those songs aren't written from the singer's perspective. They're writing it for two teens to listen to as they
Right.
paw each other in some car, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Cars were popular sexual destinations for teens in the 50s, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yep.
Elvis being beyond not an exception. If anything, sort of in the vanguard of...
Yes, definitely. On the cutting edge of getting it on in cars.
Yeah. They have him using cars at the early stages as an expedient measure because he's living with both his parents.
Yep.
He wants to bang these chicks. Where else do you go? You go into your car. That's fine. But then as he continues through life and has more options, he seems to still enjoy using the car. And at some point it moves into almost a further expediency in that he doesn't have to waste the time of taking women home because he's going to be going through multiple women's in a night. Did I say women's? I believe I did. Because, multiple women in a night. So if he just takes them to the back parking lot,
Yeah.
obviously he can cut down commute a lot.
Yeah. Save on gas.
Yeah. He bangs in limos a lot. Once he gets to that stage, he poked Natalie Wood in a limo, apparently a limo that was being followed by another limo
Yeah.
with Gladys and Vernon in it. Natalie came to visit Memphis, so Elvis showed her a good time. He took her to the movies with his family. Great night out.
Yeah.
Then driving back, he banged her in the back of a limo. And then they get back to Graceland, and they all say goodnight. And what folly does Natalie Wood get into?
Well, she decides to sneak into Elvis's room. She's ready for more.
Yeah.
And Elvis does not react well to that.
Yeah, I would say he reacts very poorly.
Yeah, he kicks her out of his room, and I think he's just not comfortable doing those dirty things in the same house, under the same roof as his parents.
Yeah, specifically Gladys, of course. Yeah, he really, by the telling of this book, he really turns immediately on Natalie Wood. Is very rude, tells her to leave the room, and then the next morning kind of coldly brushes her off.
Yeah, he's kind of done with her after that, isn't he?
Yeah, I think, as I recall, it's apparent to her very early the next morning that her visit is done and it's time to go.
Right.
So she really blew it. I mean, that's Elvis 101, though. You got to know.
Elvis's pilot of the boat. I don't know. Jesus Christ.
The more I think about the Gladys thing, that seems kind of odd. And I think maybe speaks more to his Oedipal relationship with Gladys than it does like his respect. Because like I certainly respected my parents and loved my parents.
Mm-hmm.
But as a young man, teen, I did not hesitate. If any girl wanted to touch any part of me in that house,
Yeah.
I was more than happy about that.
Yeah.
And I think that's only because I genuinely did not have sexual feelings towards my mother. Whereas I think Elvis, if they're sort of mixed in there.
Yeah, it gets a little complicated with that, I think.
And that certainly ties into the reports from earlier in the book that Elvis was not only in the same shotgun shack as his parents banged, but when he was a swaddled infant, would actually be on the bed as they banged,
Right.
getting knocked around.
Oh, man.
Vernon's knees on his head, his little baby head on his fontanelle, getting all mushed up. Though actually it would probably be Gladys's knees, because you got to imagine Vernon, as a bad back guy, is always taking the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know.
Vernon's not a thruster. No way.
Definitely not with a bad back. But I don't know. Is there? But then, how much credence do we give to the fact that he really had a bad back? Like, did he have a?
Yeah.
I'm sure he had a bad back when it came to like applying for jobs, but when it came to like romance,
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe he had a bad back. I do believe he was like very lazy.
yeah,
And I do also kind of assume that laziness would move into the bedroom as well. So
okay,
I can see him being
Yeah.
being a bottom dude.
yeah,
Let Gladys do the work.
Yeah.
And that actually feeds into, because if Elvis, swaddled Elvis, is on the bed, Gladys is up top, then she's presumably looking down at Elvis while she's banging.
Do you think she's holding him in her arms and feeding Elvis, breastfeeding Elvis, while on top of Vernon?
Possibly. But if not that, then certainly, yeah, probably just laying next to Vernon, probably up by his shoulders,
Yeah.
you know? Like kind of.
Oh yeah.
So she's looking at Elvis, baby Elvis, while she's getting drilled. So anyway, so this all leads to Elvis growing up with a complicated set of feelings towards Gladys.
Yeah.
And also, interestingly enough, Elvis gets very into group sex,
Yep.
according to this book.
If one is good, two is better.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think that possibly, since those were his first and presumably most formative sexual experiences, would be bouncing around in the bed while Gladys and Vernon porked, that maybe that fed into that sex is something beyond two people. It's more of a community thing. We never really talked about Red driving him around.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Really
Yeah.
good.
Well, Elvis is screwing chicks in the back of the car with Red driving him around, and presumably this is not like a stretch limo with a partition you can
Right.
put up. So this is in full view of Red, I guess. And then like, how does that work? Does Red just like keep his eyes straight on the road, or is he like looking behind his shoulder? And is Elvis like, hey, get a load of this, Red, and showing off for him?
Yeah.
Who knows?
That's interesting. He's got to be showing off at some. There's
Oh,
no way
yeah.
he's not. At least like catching glances in the rear view.
Yeah, especially with other stuff that gets retold in this book. Like, yeah, I'm sure he's showing off for his buddy.
Yeah. Ugh. You think Red ever tried to like steal a kiss? Like at a stoplight?
I don't know.
I think the section you're referencing where it's a younger Elvis, he's so horny that Red is just driving him around Memphis, and Red would pull up to some fans or some gals. Hey, y'all know Elvis Presley? Like, yeah. You think it's cute? Yeah. And then, Elvis might
Wanna
roll
meet
down
him?
Yeah. Like hop in the back.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Elvis is back there, and they would just drive around. It sounded like maybe just drive on the block a couple of times. Elvis would pork these kids
Yeah.
and then drop them off and then go on to the next.
Yeah.
It's such a dark, weird, very Bob Crane, very autofocus kind of vibe to that.
Yeah.
It's so removed from anything tender, and it's like it's like a crack addict.
Yeah.
Needing like multiple and just driving around through the streets, like needing to like get this fix over and over and over.
Yeah.
Really sounds exhausting. That story really sticks out to me. And it's nothing like, it's not as wild as most of the sex stories in this, but there's just something at the core that is unsettling to me. But yeah, so beyond that, there's, the gay stuff, the soft homosexuality that occurs between actually soft yet forced homosexuality between E and Earl, which is, you want to take us through that night?
They're at a party. I don't know if would you call it a rager, or is it just like a regular, like everybody's hanging out and having a good time?
Yeah.
And I think there are ladies around, whatever.
Yeah.
And Elvis just decides it's time to go to bed. So,
This is at Graceland.
yeah. So he announces that he's done. And he says to Earl, and this is a quote from the book, "Come on, Earl, let's go to bed." And Earl's kind of like puzzled.
Yeah.
Like, what? But ultimately, I guess you do what Elvis says.
Yeah.
They were, retired to the bedroom. Elvis lays down in bed, and Earl gets to either lay with him until he goes to sleep, or maybe they just go to sleep together, but in the same bed. The idea being that Elvis needs someone there in the room with him to help him fall asleep, or I don't know what that's all about. Just needs to feel someone else's presence to feel safe and secure.
Yeah, they use the phrase here, warm body next to him. It sounded like a super shaming experience for Earl to be in this party with a bunch of people, and then Elvis just stands up, like snaps his fingers.
He's humiliated, but also sort of bemused. Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. So he pushes back a little bit, and then Elvis, whatever, lays down the law.
Yeah.
And can you imagine, like, Elvis walking up the stairs, you kind of slump down behind him, walking up the stairs,
Yeah.
a couple paces behind.
Yeah.
All the other party goers have gotten quiet and are just watching you. All these girls are like watching you walk up these stairs, like,
Yeah. It's totally weird.
and then you have to like, yeah, Elvis. Imagine Elvis was a pajamas guy. He was in pajamas when he was found deceased.
Yeah. It sounds accurate to me.
Yeah. But Earl didn't live there, so
See, I just picture Earl like kicking off his shoes and like maybe
Slowly
untucking his
close.
shirt. Yeah. And like laying down on top of the covers next to Elvis. Just the whole time, like, what is going on? And like, he doesn't have a smartphone to like, he can't play solitaire while this is
No.
going on. He's just got to like, I don't know if he and Elvis are like shooting the breeze, or he's got to like quietly sing to Elvis or something like that. But he's just got to lay there and wait for Elvis to go to sleep or go to sleep himself.
I picture him having to get under the covers. I think him being on top of the covers doesn't it? He might as well be sitting in a chair.
What kind of bed do you think they're like? What size?
I'm California King. I'm sure the
Oh,
biggest
okay.
bed
Yeah.
you could get, right?
So it's not like a full,
Yeah, no, I don't think they're squeezed up on there.
not spooning together.
But I think they're both under the covers. I think since Earl didn't live there, he didn't have pajamas there. So I see Elvis putting him in a pair of his pajamas.
Yeah.
Likely too big for Earl. I don't know what their size ratio is, but I'd like to think that it's an awkward fit. Like a girl picking up her boyfriend's
Oh, yeah.
dress shirt, that kind of deal. Crawling under bed. I like to imagine Elvis then needing to read for a half hour with his reading glasses on, reading about the Shroud of Turin or some kind of spiritual book.
Yeah, and he needs it to be absolutely quiet. So he's got to like, Earl speaks up a couple times like, Elvis, you sure you want me here? And it's like, shh.
Yeah. Reading about numerology. Earl has to be perfectly still and perfectly quiet. And then Elvis, clicks off the light without even looking at Earl. He's already on his shoulder, facing away from him. Good night, Earl. And he has to sit there wide awake and stock still. As I imagine any like turning, Elvis is not a fan of that.
Yeah.
And Elvis is also probably a blanket hog.
What, a blanket hog? Oh,
Don't you think?
yeah.
Like angrily.
Yeah. Yeah. And not even because like, on purpose.
It sounds like cult stuff.
Yeah.
That's the kind of like humiliation and emasculating that like a cult leader puts there.
Yeah. And he does this stuff and these guys just like hang around, eat it up.
Yeah. I would say actually that his claim that he and Elvis were closer than brothers is fully thrown out the window just by his doing this kind of shit.
Yeah.
Because we both have brothers. Mm-hmm. And the amount of patience and tolerance I would show my brother over any kind of overstepping,
Yeah.
it would immediately be a fist fight. We would be rolling on the floor.
Yeah.
Like,
And if they truly did grow up as brothers, this wouldn't be the first time that Earl has to sleep in bed with Elvis. You'd think that like this is something that was established much younger. For this to kind of come out of nowhere at this late date in their relationship, you're gonna have to do better on convincing me you were closer than brothers.
yeah.
Earl.
Yeah, that's a good point. So he gets very into how loose women are.
Yeah.
Loose comes up in this book as a descriptor of a woman's vaginal attributes.
Yeah.
Comes up more than any other book I've ever read. It's like talking to my 7th grade self.
Yeah. It's off-putting to say the least.
Yeah. But it comes up, it seems almost constantly in this book. And partially Elvis gets very concerned about the looseness of women. And we're not talking moral looseness. We're talking physical looseness.
Right.
But it centers around their possibly having had children, because after Gladys passes, he becomes very concerned about sleeping with women who are mothers.
Right.
And he is not in any way about to do that,
Yep.
which bodes poorly for Priscilla.
Yes. It certainly does.
But yeah, so Elvis would, in his nightly rounds of gathering women to have sex with, he, or I like to think Red, would have asked, like,
Yeah.
do you have a baby? Have you ever been a mother?
Yeah.
And if they said yes, then they were out,
Right.
cut. Though, I don't know. You think he would have let him give him like handies or something?
Elvis?
Yeah, like a mother.
No, I think they're like, don't bother. We'll just move on to the next one.
Yeah, no sexual contact at all with the mother. Yeah, I'd buy that. You think Elvis ate pussy?
Man, I don't know. I don't think so. If we're to believe what's in this book, if it's all about power and superiority,
Yeah.
I don't think he would.
But like a Dixie Lock, like someone he had feelings for.
Maybe he would have if given the opportunity at that time, but just the way things shook out.
Wasn't into it.
No.
Some guys just love it. So even if it was a power thing, it would be more for his pleasure, getting his nose in it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Thank you. I think so. Yeah, I don't see him as being I don't know, man. I was going to say I don't really see him as being really into pussy eating, but I can also kind of see him being one of those guys who are super into pussy eating. It's one of the two, right?
Yeah.
I think it's probably
There's no
fair to
middle
say
ground.
He is in a position where there's no need for there to be middle ground.
Yeah.
He doesn't need it to be nice.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing it because he loves it,
Mm-hmm.
or he's not doing it because he doesn't want to do it.
Right.
I'm leaning towards him not doing it because
Yeah,
he doesn't want to do
I
it.
too.
I'm thinking it's icky. Thinking it's kind of gross.
Yeah. I mean, I could also see him thinking like that's dirty too. And he just likes to like it's strictly peen vag contact.
Anything else is an aberration.
Yeah.
I don't see Elvis being casual about anything in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's either like, yeah, I really like that, or we're not doing that, or that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And we'll have to keep our eye out in further books about the pussy eating thing.
Yeah.
And if not, if we ever get like Larry Geller in here, we should start writing down questions. If we ever get like a actual Elvis confidant in here.
Was he that kind of companion? Like, was he part of the mafia? Was he up to shenanigans with them, or would he and Elvis get together and get deep?
The latter. I think Larry was probably very aloof from the other Memphis Mafia, considered himself at a different level, and would not mix, comfortably. And then, even like symbolically, that makes sense, because I always picture the Memphis Mafia down in like the pool room, or the music room. Larry Geller's up in the bathroom with Elvis in his inner sanctum, higher elevation than the others, gently stroking Elvis's head, scalp, and talking about cloud formations and things like that, and numerology.
Significant numbers,
Right. But so Elvis would ask these women if they were a mother or had ever given birth or anything like that. If yes, he would immediately send them away. And then, once they were actually getting busy, if he felt she was looser than he expected.
Yeah, if there was any suspicion at all, she had to go.
Yeah, he would freeze up and just, it sounds like mid-coitus, just kick her out.
Yeah.
So he's still got a hard on. He's just like pointing towards the door. And then they send some other girl up there.
Yeah. You can just see her just disappointedly picking up her clothes off the floor and just slinking out of the room.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Being like, should I ask for an autograph? I don't think so. I think I'll just go. Yeah. So the looseness is a big thing, but Earl makes a semi-interesting point that Elvis's disinclination to sleep with the mother is partially what led him to sleep with younger girls, like early teens as kind of his bag in this, because they would be less likely to be mothers. That sounds like probably not the main reason. I would guess it might be a partial bit of the reason, but I think that's a multivariate issue for Elvis.
Yeah.
I mean, it leads to the question of how many illegitimate children Elvis likely had. And I've been of the opinion for quite a while that I think it's a lot.
And after having read this book, I tend to agree. Coming into this, I thought he was a tender and gentlemanly lover. But it sounds like this book, he's just ripping through chicks one after another, multiple girls at a time, multiple girls a night. So I think it's much more likely that there are some illegitimate little Elvises out there than I thought previously. My eyes have been opened.
Your eyes have been gaped. But I don't picture him as, I don't think he's not a condom guy.
No.
I can picture Vernon and Parker buying tons of condoms for him.
Yeah.
And begging him to use them, putting them in his pockets and stuff.
Yeah.
And him not.
Just flipping them out the window as they drive down the highway.
Him having zero use for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I picture him strictly raw dog. I think probably the only thing that saved him from being having just hundreds of kids is that, I think he liked to see a splash.
The spectacle of ejaculation.
Don't you think?
Yeah. Well,
he's a simple guy.
There's a quote in here about him having to put towels down on the back of a car. And I mean, just knowing that, This guy is like, he's like a fountain, probably.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, the towels are for pussy juice as well as
All of
man
it.
juice. Just how gooey it would get back there.
Oh, man.
Going through a lot of towels, too.
Yeah.
'Cause you can't reuse those towels. Hopefully.
No, I don't see Elvis as a guy who would want to reuse those towels, even if he could.
So nasty. So you imagine, like, they probably,
You think there's leather upholstery in the back? Like something you can wipe down, right?
yeah, I would imagine.
But then
so.
does it get slippery with the towels on there? Like just the logistics of car sex.
And laying out
How'd
the
it
towels.
work?
It's very funky.
Yeah.
And did they save the towels and then clean them?
Yeah. And I for some reason, I'm picturing like a whole grip of like hand towels, but it's probably like, it's probably like big beach towels, right?
Yeah, I think probably beach towels. And I think,
bleached white.
oh, you think?
Oh, bright white. Yeah.
Oh, you think?
Yeah.
So you think they washed them instead of just threw them out?
No. I mean, I think like they're
Store
prepared.
fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm picturing Red in the front, passenger seat, a stack of towels. Elvis in the back.
And Red just driving with one hand and throwing towels over his shoulder, not
Yeah.
even looking.
And Elvis, you think Elvis is laying down those towels or he's telling the girls
No,
to?
no way.
You think Red or the girls is laying
Like
down the towels?
Vester or somebody like that.
Well, no, but between women,
Oh.
laying them down in the back.
Oh, yeah. Well, probably Red then, or, you know, if Red can get somebody else to do it, somebody else. I don't know. I just don't see Elvis doing anything like that.
Yeah.
Like, Elvis doesn't have to do any of the prep work for anything. He just like, he shows up, there are towels down, girls are getting on, you know. He goes home, dinner's on the table. You know, he goes in the studio, they're ready to go, Elvis, when you are. Like, that's how he lives his life. So he's definitely not throwing towels down.
That's a good point. So I bet they finished with a girl, they drop her off, they park by some public, like some garbage can. Elvis gets out the back, Red goes around, takes the towels, the used towels, throws them out, or if they're going to wash them later, throws them in the trunk.
Or at a time when being a litter bug probably wasn't as big a deal, just like tossing them out the window.
Be the girl like, why don't you take these if you find a garbage can?
Yeah,
Throw
or
'em away
just
for us.
like as they are screaming down the road, like just
Huck 'em out.
rolling down the window, yeah, huck them in the ditch.
That could be too.
Yeah.
But I think if they did stop, that they would throw them out, and then Red would immediately lay down the new towels, probably tucking them in,
Yeah.
you know, between the vertical and the horizontal parts of the seat
Yep.
so they stay.
Yeah.
I'm sure Elvis was very picky about that. And then, Red would get it set up, and then Elvis would go sit on the towels, and then they would drive and to their next sexual victim.
Again, like I'm just thinking about the logistics of all this. So like the towels are down, the girls in the car, like what happens then? Like is Elvis like disrobing completely? Or is he just like pulling his pants down to his knees? Or like
So even getting fully dressed between women.
yeah, like is he sitting back there in like his boxers? Or is he wearing tighty whities? Like my mind's racing.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of him being back there, even shirtless, just seeing that driving around, just like shirtless, pale Elvis in the
Yeah.
back seat. I'm picturing the whole scenario, and I am definitely finding amusement in what I think the woman's reaction would be being told, "Do you want to meet Elvis?" Yes. And you're Red, like, oh, they open up the back door, and he opens it up, and Elvis is sitting there on a bunch of towels. He's like patting the seat next to him. You're like, oh God, what's happening?
I just see him like, yeah, you open it up and it is just like wall to wall towels and Elvis sitting there completely naked with a hard on, just like pointing at it.
Come on, honey.
Red have to wear like a hood.
He had to, I'm sure he was putting a shirt back on because they were probably, I mean, he couldn't have, was that your refractory period?
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't have been like so quick that he's not even bothering. So they
And-
probably drove around, ate something, sat and talked about it. I'm sure there was a lot of discussion.
Yeah.
They're like dead ringers where it's like it didn't happen unless they talk about it.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm sure he's like putting his stuff back on.
Yeah. But is he taking it all the way off? Like, I don't see him just like pulling his wiener out through his fly. Because I think he's like, he's a very image conscious guy. Like clothes are a big thing for him. So he wouldn't want to get like spooge and juices all over his like fancy trousers.
Oh, you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, he's at least taking him down to his knees, right?
Yeah, if not fully disrobing. Was Elvis a shirt on or shirt off guy? Like, I mean, I could see him always being, by this book's telling, he's very conscious of his looks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's like dyeing his hair in grade school.
Yeah.
And wearing mascara. In grade school, which is insane.
Yeah.
So I can imagine him being a guy who always thinks he's kind of fat, like being like really embarrassed just because even though he's got a totally normal chest.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I could see him being embarrassed about his body somewhat. Either way, a dark day for that woman.
Or a highlight of her life.
Probably both.
Yeah.
Kind of simultaneously.
Yeah.
But yeah, then it's a question of like where Elvis liked to finish. And that also, I can really see him feeling strongly about that. So I get the feeling, well, I think the more sex you get, the stronger you feel about that. I feel like you kind of learn what you like.
Uh-huh.
And if you don't get what you like, you're kind of like,
yeah,
not that satisfied.
Yeah.
So I can see Elvis, I can see him being really into like shooting on women's faces. And I think that comes up in a book. I think I've read that somewhere.
Now that you mention it, I think there's mention of him liking to, it's in the Memphis Mafia book. Elvis really liked to cut loose in a girl's hair.
Okay. Well, that I buy. That I fully buy.
Yeah.
And that actually ties in with, you know, he loves, you know, there's no secret about how dolled up he always liked Priscilla to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, perfect and always her hair was really nice. And then as we talked earlier about his liking to take like a virgin and knock her off her pedestal.
Yeah.
So to get a girl, especially a young girl, and get her so like pristinely manicured and done up nice, and then to ruin that through your sexual activity.
Yeah.
Especially to cut loose in her hair. Would definitely, I see how that would all come into play. Like,
Yeah.
that definitely works for sure. But I can also see him having an almost childlike fascination. Like he's one of these guys who are really into cream pies
Okay.
and like seeing it. So like shooting off and then kind of can see him kind of like kneeling down and looking, you know, and looking at it. And
You'd have to have like a flashlight or something back there too, man.
Oh, in the car. I picture him more in his bedroom.
Oh, see, I'm still with the towels on the back seat.
Yeah. Oh, in the car, I'm thinking it's probably, I think at that point in his life, he's probably still pretty, I don't see him like, when I'm picturing him like getting really into cream pies, I'm picturing like, I think like 70s Elvis, where he's kind of out of it already.
Sure.
But would like finish and then just like stare at it, you know, kind of bubbling out.
And he's got one of those things that the doctors wear.
Shiny.
Yeah, so he can
forehead
reflect the
thing.
light in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But tits, I don't really see him being a shoot off on her tits guy. I've never heard of him being like a tit guy.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've never heard him being like any kind of like partialism.
Yeah,
like being a leg guy or a butt guy or anything like that.
Again, it's just my mind just like running wild, but I just see him like doggy styling a chick and then just like blowing all over her back.
Your mind is running wild, Pat. Well, they do.
And him just and him like giving a cheer when he's doing it too. Like, yeah.
Roaring. Yeah, I can see that. Well, they do talk about him specifically like spanking chicks and then going in from the rear.
Yeah.
That's actually like on page 239, we discussed that. So that was a specific thing he liked. From the rear, I don't know if that means anal sex. I don't take him as an anal sex guy.
If that happened, I feel like that would come later on, like in the 70s.
Yeah, a little darker times.
Yeah.
I don't see Elvis I don't see Elvis being that comfortable with like icky stuff.
Yeah.
Like dirty stuff. Right? Anal, I think, would fit into that.
You're talking about poo-poo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Butt stuff. And yeah, like we said, like the cunnilingus, I see Elvis thinking, oh, that's kind of gross. And like, no one to put his mouth
That's
down
where the
there.
babies come out, man.
Mouths are for food, right?
Yeah.
And praying to our Lord. But I do, in reading this book, that detail in particular, that Elvis was really into spanking chicks and then going in from the rear. If anything crystallizes my questioning Earl, it's him sharing that so perfectly highlights this relationship to someone he claims to be closer than brothers to.
Yeah.
And I think about close friends of mine, and if they passed and there was any interest in a book about them, I just can't picture. Again, we'll go to Brad. Like Brad passing, I'm writing the book about our friendship and then talking about how he liked to he's really into spanking chicks.
Yeah.
And then sliding in from behind. Like that was one of his main things. He would want you to know this. Like the fans have been asking.
The fans deserve to have
the truth.
And Elvis wants you to know this.
So yeah, it signals to me like I think Earl might be that's one of the things that put him in the negative column, I'll say.
Yeah.
So it all leads up, I would say, the cap to the entire boner aspect of this book. is his and Earl's adventures together. And this is the bombshell of the book, right?
Yes.
Nothing comes closer.
Right. This is the number one. Like if you pick this book up and you got to read one part, this is the part that you want.
Yeah. This is the selling point. So do you want to just tell the story?
Yes. Let me.
So I'll set the place and then you walk us through it. I think they are in Graceland. I imagine it's probably in the 60s, probably early 60s, if not. Yeah, probably early 60s. I think they're back from the army. And as normal, there is a cluster of fans, female fans, down by the gate. Elvis is feeling randy. And as he normally would do, he selects someone to go out and procure some of these gals to bring them up to the house.
Does this have to do with, does he ask Earl in this instance to go pick out a girl and Earl kind of balks?
I think it's this one. You're grimacing reading our notes.
Yeah.
Much like when he ordered Earl to go to bed with him. I think he was like, okay, go get me some chicks. And Earl was kind of like, gee, I'm a little bit too pure for that. I'm too good of a person.
This doesn't sit right with me, Elvis.
Yeah, I have respect for women. To which he says,
Earl, we got to get you out of your shell and into the world. Girls come here because they want to be with me. They're creaming their little lace panties at the thought of walking through that door.
And then Elvis has another thought.
Bring back 4. We're all going to have fun. And make sure they're young ones.
That's a great, like, oh, one last thing. Like, oh, don't forget eggs. So Earl being closer than a brother to Elvis, he ultimately says, okay, he goes down and grabs 4 young ones. Without doubt, asks them at the gates, have you ever had a baby?
Oh,
They go, no. They go, okay, come on. Next one. Have you ever had a baby? Does your vagina feel like you've ever had a baby? Just as importantly.
oof.
So they pass that test. And I guess, do you think they walk him up to the house? Or Earl probably drove down. I'm sure they drive down.
Probably drive, yeah.
Probably a limo, some fancy-ass car.
Yeah. That just does the circle of the driveway. Yeah, for sure.
So they get all the girls in the back, drive them back to the house. And this is where Elvis introduces to Earl that something even more exciting is happening for him.
Earl's going to be a part of this party.
Yeah, we're all going to have fun, meaning this is for us 2 and these 4 chicks. So it's a sextet, I guess, right?
Yeah. 2 guys, 4 girls. I think the idea being, I guess I didn't get a sense from the story, like if they're like, these 2 are for you, Earl, and these 2 are for me, or was it just like musical chairs?
I think it's just a big old plate of spaghetti. I think they're all intermingling, is my take. I think that's how I'm taking it. Yeah, because at some point, yeah, it's definitely an orgy.
Oh, yeah.
Because there is caressing and kissing going all different ways. So, yeah, they're not paired off or anything. They're all on bed.
Yeah.
He tells Earl that it's time he learned what women are meant for. And then, do you want to tell us this?
Sure.
So they're now up in the bedroom. Earl's still very hesitant, but intrigued with these 4 girls who can imagine? I'm sure their gum smacking has slowed considerably at this point. These like early teenage girls, suddenly they're in Elvis's bedroom, probably stinks like semen. There's a bunch of dirty towels on the floor. They're with this creepy guy, Earl.
Elvis took off his shirt and threw it over the lamp, casting a sultry glow across the bed. He undressed completely, then flopped back on the bed, gently stroking himself. According to Earl, Elvis says, first one naked gets this.
So they all start spaghetti piling. Earl, as I recall, gets into it pretty quickly. Like his hesitation goes out the window right away.
Can I just read this
Sure.
other paragraph? 3 of the girls giggled and began to strip, but one hesitated, having second thoughts at being part of an orgy. Elvis reached up and pulled her down to him tenderly, kissing and caressing her while the rest of us watched spellbound. While they kissed, he slowly unzipped her skirt and slid it off. He broke away but kept his eyes fixed on hers while he pulled her sweater over her head, murmuring about how beautiful her breasts were. Once she was naked beside him, Elvis smiled at the rest of us. Better hurry up or you'll miss all the fun.
Probably still back to stroking himself. So they do. They all dive in. No one has any problem with this.
Yeah.
These 4 girls are all like, yeah, sure. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
We're into it. I'm sure they all spit their gum into Earl's hand and he goes and throws it into the bathroom trash can.
Wads it up in a Kleenex.
And then they're getting crazy. Earl's down. There's a really sweet moment on page 253 where Earl reports that a couple times I inadvertently ran my hand over Elvis's soft skin. And he responded with a moan of pleasure. So it sounds like they all bang, and at least Elvis spooches because they're kind of done. And it's on to the next point in the night, which you would think would be, well, get rid of these girls.
Get some more.
Get some more, or we'll take it easy, have a sandwich.
And we'll pick it right back up.
But no, Elvis has further designs that seem to come to him just in a moment of inspiration. It doesn't sound like he had it planned, and that's to Earl had been filming some kind of documentary footage. It sounded like B-roll footage for something, or just there was some project. It was beyond just like home movies, I think. But for some reason, Earl had a camera and a bunch of film, and had been going around Graceland filming. So Elvis said, like, "Hey, I got a great idea, and why don't we film this great event?"
Earl, grab that camera for me.
Yeah, and the lights.
Yeah,
and a bounce card.
That's the thing. Like, it's not just Earl. Like, hey, Earl, go grab the camera and film this. It sounds like it's a real, like, all right, we're gonna make us a film.
Yeah.
So get the camera and get the lights. And Earl, you need to set up the lights this way and that so the lighting's good.
Yeah.
And then it's off to the races.
Yeah, we need a key light. We need a rim. We need a fill. Well, Elvis is in the movie industry.
Yeah.
He knows what it takes.
He's a real pro.
He's not going for some gonzo shit, So it's tripods. There might be a little handheld,
Yeah.
but only if they want to get into kind of like a new wave thing. But mostly very static camera. Yeah, and so they film, they're banging, and they have a great time. There's a really fun moment the next morning. So eventually they finish with these girls, and they let them all go home.
Party's over.
Yeah, they probably give them their little gift bags, Elvis tote bags with like some refrigerator magnets.
Oh, yeah.
Little parting gift.
Plastic bags to put their soiled stuff in.
Yeah. Yeah, probably like in the foyer on the little like side table in the foyer, there was just a bunch. It was like kids' party favor bags.
Yeah.
Just like for the gals. You take one of those on the way home. So then the next morning, they're in the kitchen. And as we all know how it is, the morning after you first have group sex with a good friend, you can often feel slightly, you're questioning things and you're a little off balance maybe.
Yeah.
Things have changed. So Earl is down in the kitchen where Elvis walks in, and Earl immediately gets a little red-faced, to which, and the quote is, "Elvis laughed when he saw my color and came up behind and wrapped his arms around me. I told you we'd have a good time, didn't I?" That is something you've just had. I think most fellas, if they're having group sex, they're very conscious of minimizing the homosexual aspects of that. There's very little touching unless you're Eiffel Towering and you need to create the form. But that's
high
beyond.
fives only.
Yeah. So for Elvis to completely buck that and do the gayest thing in this or probably any Elvis book of like, I mean, he's coming up and basically he's putting his dick to Earl's butt, wrapping his hands around him like your wife does when you're washing the dishes.
And it's this is really throwing me for a loop because it's not only like, is it kind of gay, but it's like their family, right? So like,
yeah,
this is super weird.
That's true. They are like closer than brothers. I don't know. Honestly, thankfully, I never had group sex with a family member, but I could see my brother just to fuck with me and to see me squirm doing this. I can actually 100% see that. But I don't read this as that being Elvis's intention. Like, this is just a tender moment.
Yeah.
So from there, they continued to do this all week.
It's not just a one-time thing. Like, they carry on for, a good week.
Yeah, it's the new thing. The only difference being that the women get progressively younger, bottoming out on the last night when it was 4 14-year-olds, which is pretty young. That's like 8th grade, I think.
Yeah, that's 8th grade or freshman year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty young. That's braces and shit.
Yeah.
We won't linger on that. But this one gets fun because Elvis has a lot of insecurity about his sexuality as well, in that he's under the impression that since he's such a sex symbol, that women, when they go to sleep with him, expect a real 10-bell performance. Like they think they have very, very high expectations.
Right.
And he feels that even if he performs very well, they're going to be disappointed. And he becomes highly, according to this book, highly sensitive to that. And further resentment towards women bubbles up around that idea that he's sleeping with these women and then they're going like, that wasn't so good, So one of these unfortunates, these 14-year-olds, makes the mistake on this final night of making some very gentle, vague sign that she wasn't totally satisfied. And this might have been just a glance that Elvis misread. Who knows what this is?
Yeah.
But this triggers that vanity in Elvis, thinking that his virility is being questioned once again. And so he he pins her down and pokes her once again with, quote, forceful, violent thrusting, which is a pretty dark moment too, I would say.
Yeah.
It makes me think we shouldn't have even mentioned the fact that they're 14. Like, that really makes it not even, it's pretty gross. That's pretty awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's up there. And that leads to a highlight of what they did with these films after this week, which of course they got them developed, and it became common for at least a while for Elvis and the rest, and Earl presumably, and the rest of the Memphis Mafia to sit and watch these films together, and Elvis would provide a running commentary.
Yeah.
And this woman left, she was particularly important to these commentaries. Why? I'm going to make you say this.
Okay. Elvis's favorite was the young girl he swore had been a virgin, and he pointed out bloodstains on his sheets to back up his claim.
Yeah. Which is pretty gross.
Yeah, it's super gross.
Yeah. You can't pause a projector, so he probably had to keep, so either he had to keep rewinding it to keep showing, like, look at that, or they got a really good shot of it in the filming, in which case he would have said, like, Earl, get that camera, get a load of this, get this, as they had like a close-up of it.
This is all just so bananas. Like, it just gets crazier and crazier as you go through. Like, so first Elvis likes group sex, and then like Elvis brings his cousin into group sex, and the group gets bigger, and then it's like Elvis films it, and they film, I guess, until they're out of film, and then Elvis is able to get this stuff developed somehow, and then he brings it back and shows it to his buddies. And like, it's nuttier and nuttier as the thing goes. Like, I can't believe, like, I don't know. I don't want to have sex around my buddies, first of all. And then, like, I don't want to watch my buddies having sex. And then I just can't imagine feeling anything than like just supremely uncomfortable in the situation. The projector's running and there's Elvis on screen, like fucking with Earl. I'm expected now to like be cheering him on and like having a great time. It's bananas.
It would be highly unpleasant. Yeah, sit with your friend and watch him as he shows you.
And presumably as he's like sitting next to you, kind of like throwing elbows at you, like, watch this part right here.
Yeah. You're ready for some
this is a real good part right here. Hold on.
Somebody say forceful, violent thrusting. Watch this one, Ray.
See the look in her eye? she deserved that, right?
Yeah, you're right. It is a very strange situation, and it does escalate perfectly as we go as a story. Mm-hmm. The only logical ending to this really is them all masturbating while they watch it, right? That's the only thing that could have really capped this story. I don't even want to think about it. But thankfulully for the listeners, that is the end of boner talk, I think.
Yeah.
I think we're on to emotional Elvis. I think there is boners in emotional Elvis.
Did we talk about the sightseeing for panties?
Oh, dude.
We should just go over that real quick.
We can't not.
Yeah.
That's an excellent moment. How do we? So yeah, this happens in Texas. They're down for basic training. Elvis, of course, brought his whole family down there, including Earl for some reason. And early one morning before revelry, they're all living off base.
Yeah.
They're renting a house. And Elvis just reports to the Army in the morning.
Yeah,
goes and punches his
time
time
quite
clock.
Know how that works, but yeah.
So Elvis has a little bit of free time in the morning, and he invites Earl to go out and check out, quote, the scenery. Certainly the impression is that this is a recurring thing for Elvis. Like, this isn't the first time he had this idea.
Yeah.
So he takes him out for the drive, and then the quote here is Elvis telling Earl, early morning's the best time, because that's when you can see women hanging their private things out to dry. And so they go out driving around, and this is dawn, I guess. I mean, he's got to get to the Army. So
pretty
it is
early. Yeah.
really early.
Yeah.
Break of dawn.
Crack of dawn.
So yeah, they're driving around looking at panties drying on lines in this small Texas town.
Yeah.
Clearly anyone who looks knows it's Elvis. I mean, it's probably a town of like a couple hundred. I mean, they know who Elvis is.
Yeah.
It's probably a pretty distinctive car.
Yeah.
So these women are presumably, and husbands, looking out their windows in the morning and seeing this idling car with Elvis staring at their fannies, right?
Oh, or that, or it's like, hey, what's that car doing parked on the side of the road? And then they like look into their backyard, and Elvis is like doing an army crawl, and like has like peeking over the fence.
Yeah. So they go and look at panties, and Elvis waxes poetic.
Look there, Earl. I like the ones with lacy edges. Can't you just imagine what goes on inside?
Yeah.
I bet they belong to a natural redhead, a sweet young thing.
Yeah. And in the book, the line, "Can't you just imagine what goes on inside," is not appended by a question mark. It's just a period, which gives it a tone more like, "Can't you just imagine what goes on inside?" You know, it's almost like wistful. It's not a question. Not even a rhetorical question.
As you read that, he's staring straight into Earl's eye, like just a dead face staring right into Earl, and just saying, "Can't you just imagine what goes on inside?"
Yeah, like totally fish-eyed.
Yeah.
Like his eyes. Maybe even gently stroking himself.
Or is he curled up behind Earl, got him in a bear hug, whispering it in his ear?
Yeah. So that's a big, sweet moment. I think there is stuff in other books about Elvis and panties. I seem to recall at some point them saying he liked white cotton panties were his main bag.
I feel like I've heard that too, although I don't know the exact source of where that comes from.
Yeah, we can't cite that, but it's out there somewhere. I'm sure we'll get to it. But yeah, so panties. They don't really talk about him stealing panties, but just looking at him.
I do like the thought of him stealing like a whole bunch at once, like and going out like without Earl, and then let's like parking somewhere and just like sitting in the back, throwing them up in the air like he's just hit it rich. He's got one pair over his face, and he's just throwing the rest. Whee!
Like Scrooge McDuck. Yeah. With panties. Yeah. I mean, if he was a panty guy, he would have an incredibly smelly, enormous collection. He would have a mountain of panties.
Unless like he does what he needs to do with them, and he's just like immediately ashamed. And again, it's just like him tossing them out the car window.
Yeah.
Rips down the highway.
I could see him getting them all the way home and then finishing with them.
Then like, what's he going to do with them? Like, Elvis, what are all these women's panties doing? I don't know what you're talking about, Mama.
Yeah, or just like just outside his window, there's just a pile of panties. Like, I don't know.
I don't know where those.
I don't know anything about it.
Those girls are crazy, man.
Yeah, right. It might even be too. It's really, well, it's like the most innocent thing. Mm-hmm. You know, there's something kind of charming about it.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of like wistfully dreaming.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's nice. It doesn't really add up considering how ravenous he was before the army. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's well established by the time he goes to the army. He is like, you know, priapic male.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't even want to talk about that because it makes me think maybe it's not true. And
oh, yeah.
it's probably not true, but I don't even want to consider that.
No, let's not then.
Of anything in this, I want that to be true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the Elvis I hold in my heart, right?
Yeah.
Well, on to the final of the third themes of this book. Behind family ties and boners, it is...
Emotional Elvis.
Yeah, highly, highly emotional, I would say, right?
Yeah, oh, very. He seems to feel things more than the rest of us mortals do. Yeah,
the image that came to my mind was of Kevin Bacon in the movie Footloose when he's dancing in that warehouse and he's sort of thrashing about and like slamming against the walls.
He's anger dancing.
Yeah, that seems to be how Elvis lived his life. Or when the guy from Aha got out of he's trying to get out of the cartoon universe.
Banging on the walls and stuff.
Yeah, he's like slamming himself against the hallway.
Yeah, and I have in my mind like just a generic scene from any after school special where some little kid has he's got a problem, runs into his bedroom and starts tearing posters off the wall.
Yeah, which is pretty close to what Elvis actually does in this.
Yeah, if it had posters on the wall, they definitely would have come down.
Yeah. Very early in the book, he steals an apple for Gladys and takes it home and presents it to her. She, of course, since the whole family's poor as dirt.
Yeah, they got no money.
Yeah, she questions him where he got the money, and he can't answer.
Marches him back down to the store, right? And he's got to give it back and apologize.
Yep.
And this is very humiliating for Elvis.
He's deeply shamed.
Yeah.
Well, because part of that is a core of Elvis's personality in this book is created by the disrespect and the shame he felt from his poverty.
Yeah.
And that was a driving force for him by Earl's telling. And certainly that being shamed like that for stealing the apple keys right into that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in response, in the first of many tantrums in this book, which we'll detail here, he goes home and just starts clawing the wallpaper off the walls,
Yeah,
like tearing wallpaper
literally
off the walls.
peeling the wallpaper off the walls, which I can't imagine that was looked upon well by Gladys and Vernon.
No.
Although, I'm sure they were renting this place, so probably, it wasn't as big a deal as it could have been.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a deposit, though.
Yeah.
Like a bushel of corn or something. Certainly, that is a good point. That I was going to say, Vernon didn't do a very good job of putting that wallpaper up. If you could just peel it off with your little tiny fingers.
Right.
But that makes sense that it would be put up by someone else. According to the book, Elvis gets through 2.5 walls before Gladys comes in and stops him. So he is that's an extended tantrum.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've got time to turn the corner,
Yeah.
you're getting after it.
Yeah. And he's a kid. So what is he jumping up?
I didn't think about that. Is he from the top down?
Yeah, maybe he's peeling from the bottom and then pulling
just
back.
pulling it up.
I'm sure he's figuring it out as he goes.
He's just wrecking stuff, though.
I'm sure crying.
Oh,
Just spazzing.
yeah. He does a lot of crying in this book. And I feel like in other books I've read, he does a lot of crying, not only in anger, but, out of regret and happiness. There are a lot of tears shed.
And so this actually foreshadows, I believe, as I recall, it's the opening of Elvis What Happened, where he's ordering the Mike Stone hit
Yeah.
and then proceeds to try to climb up a wall.
Right. I mean, as it's described in that book, he is literally attempting to climb the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if there was wallpaper on that wall, he would, in fact, probably just be tearing the wallpaper down. If it was as poorly hung as this wallpaper apparently is.
What did that happen in a Vegas hotel room? And
That's how I recall it.
I bet that's the quality of workmanship might be a little higher there.
I think so. So it makes you wonder, was he trying to climb the wall in Vegas, or was he
Trying to rip the.
Is it just this motion of is it just clawing at walls is what his instincts are leading him to?
Yeah, I mean, if he wasn't, it would still make sense to me, because I think we've talked about it. It's talked about in this book. It's talked about in a lot of books. His existence in many ways was like a prison.
Yep.
So they're young, they're limited by Vernon and Gladys and their economic situation. They don't have any money. There's, whether it's real or not, but the perceptions of them socially, Elvis seems to feel like that's keeping him hemmed in. And then he becomes a singer, and he's being controlled by his parents and his managers. He gets famous, and he can't go out and do the things that he wants to do, so he's a prisoner of his fame as well. So, I don't know, makes sense that he's trying to break down walls of some kind.
Yeah. Yeah, if he's not clawing, if he is climbing, if the instinct is to, climb over these walls somehow or, ascend them. Yeah, it does make some weird
symbolic sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It fits.
So that's the first of the many tantrums. There's a talk when he's a boy. Earl reports that just in general, he would be known to slam doors and punch walls, or just run as fast as he could down the streets until he wore himself out. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I need a neighborhood kid like that. I would love to look out the window. There he goes. Just crying and running down the middle of the street until he's just panting. He just kind of slinks back in the house.
Heap in the gutter.
All better now, Mama. He really tears it up. He finds out Vernon is dating again when he starts seeing Dee. That causes much inner turmoil, I would say. Immediately upon learning that, he hurled furniture and left holes in the walls with his fists. So I guess he graduated from clawing at walls. He's moving into attacking the walls.
Yeah.
He cannot surmount them. He's discovered that. So he must break through them.
Break them now, yes.
Yeah. So in terms of...
I mean, and then as far as tantrums, the biggest one kind of comes earlier on after his mom's funeral.
Oh my God.
Have we talked about that yet?
No. That's a great scene. I mean, the whole arc of this story is, as we've said before, Elvis grows up feeling disrespected and ignored, and he's ashamed of himself, less than, for sure. And so he starts dressing outrageously to get attention, starts acting out a little bit, singing and all that kind of stuff. But there's this dark core to it all. By this book's telling, he goes into all of this, not because he's just irrepressibly filled with talent and love, but there's a darkness driving his ambitions, right?
Yeah, there's a huge chip on his shoulder.
Yeah. And then, so he takes that gets him through the army, into fame. But then act 2 of that, his emotional life in this book, is Gladys passing. And actually, he doesn't get an act 2. It's like F. Scott Fitzgerald stuff, where he goes straight to act 3. Because really, Gladys passes, and according to this book, that's it for Elvis.
Yeah.
Like, he essentially has a nervous breakdown, which he never recovers from. Mm-hmm. Earl specifically says, like, his eyes deadened and he just changed, which I kind of buy. I mean, we've all seen the photos of Elvis from the 60s and certainly in the 70s where he is dead-eyed. Like, so many of those publicity shots, even for the movies, he's just clearly checked out. And obviously there's a lot of going into that. I mean, he's doing something he's bored with. He's on drugs. But by this telling, Gladys's passing had a huge amount to do with that.
Yeah.
And that is backed up by a couple big scenes. So part of this, we have to backtrack a little bit. As we discussed, Elvis brought the family with him to basic training. But then he gets down there and then he's feeling stifled because he wants to do more than just drive around and look at panties. He wants to bring some ladies home.
Yeah.
Not kiss their vaginas, right?
Right.
Lay down some towels. Wink, wink, right? But, he's got the family there. We already established, as with the Natalie Wood incident, he can't be banging with Gladys in the house.
Right.
And he's getting filled up. So he actually, prays to God. He's praying that Gladys will go away. He just wants some time to do his stuff, to blow off some steam.
Cut loose,
so to speak. Praying that Gladys leaves. And, of course, she then gets sick while in Texas. They fly her back to Memphis because that's where the doctors are, and she can get some bed rest.
Elvis gets leave from the army. He comes to Memphis straight from Texas and checks in with his mom, who tells him, "Don't worry about me, Elvis. You should go home and get some rest, and we'll see each other tomorrow."
Yep.
Or whatever. He goes home, and does he kind of have party that night?
I think so.
I think there's some, him getting it on.
Yeah.
And, of course, during the night, then she dies.
Yep.
And so Elvis is devastated. His mom was gone. But he's also kind of angry at her because she sent him away.
Yeah.
And he couldn't be there with her.
Yep. So there's that. And then also this horrible guilt that he prayed for her to leave.
And now she's gone.
Yeah. And he feels like he stumbled into a classic devil's bargain. Or like, oh, yeah, I'll get her. She'll leave, but she dies. That kind of deal. So he feels directly responsible. He prayed to God that she would leave, and he did this to her. So he is not taking any of this well. They do a viewing at Graceland right prior to the actual funeral. And when they're done, the funeral attendants are wheeling her coffin out of the door, and Elvis throws himself onto the coffin.
Yeah.
And so everyone else kind of respectfully, out of respect or out of fear of...
Yeah, it seems like respect and, and they're very nervous.
Yeah, general hesitation around someone who's established a propensity for wild tantruming. Eventually, a couple of the attendants try to pull him away, and he lashes out and starts punching at the air, saying, "Don't touch her! Don't touch her!" But eventually they calm him down. I'm sure he drops to the floor sobbing again, and they take that opportunity to wheel the casket out. And then at the actual funeral, Elvis is not doing much better, and they come to the end of the proceedings when they're actually lowering the coffin into the grave hole. And they say, this has really made me laugh, that Elvis made kind of a jolting motion, like
he's going in.
Yeah, he's going for it. But Vernon grabs him. Vernon actually grabs him by the arm to hold him back because he can see his son's going to jump in there and try to take the ride down into the hole with her. And here he cries, and I'll quote this. So this is at the funeral. The coffin is squeakily being drawn down into the hole. Like, quick, 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 quick. Elvis, "Don't leave me all alone. Oh, please, Mama. Give me more time to make you happy. I'll be better. I didn't mean to send you away forever. Oh, don't leave. I need to hold your little hands and feet again. It was all for you. I did it all for you. That actually sounds like something John Waters would write.
Or it sounds like The Omen. It's all for you, Damien.
Yeah, right. So I love that. I mean,
Yeah.
in the holding your hands and feet, that doesn't come up anywhere else in the book that was like a thing. I mean, certainly holding her hands, I can imagine, but the situation where he'd be holding her feet.
I don't know. I could see her getting a few pops in her, being like, rub mama's feet, Elvis.
Yeah.
I've had a hard day.
We got that rheumatoid.
Yeah.
And her feet would have hurt because she's been walking around in socks.
Yeah.
But those feet would not be aptly described as little because, as we established earlier, they're swollen. Too swollen for shoes. So, I mean, Elvis is definitely having disorganized thoughts at this point. But yeah, just generally sitting there and holding her feet is funny to me. Especially like not rubbing, not massaging.
Just holding them?
Just the act of holding her feet. But he doesn't follow the coffin down. And yeah, that was basically his mental breakdown. He never recovered.
Yeah.
He started into the sleeping pills and tranquilizers during this whole event, which he called his nerve pills. I will definitely, if I ever get addicted to pills, I will never sway from calling them my nerve pills, even when I'm in like rehab. And yeah, so in terms of more emotional Elvis, like the way Earl Greenwood paints Elvis's obsession with Scylla after between his leaving Germany and her arriving in Memphis, I mean, it's like he's completely fixated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And seems to be thinking like, everything's a disaster. I'm unhappy. I came back. I'm doing movies I don't want to do, recording songs I don't want to sing.
Yeah.
She'll fix everything. Like she'll come and...
Right. And the fact that they're separated by such a great distance and for so long, is it a couple of years before she comes over? That's a significant amount of time.
Yeah. Especially for Elvis.
So it gives him the opportunity to just like build her up in his mind.
Yeah.
In this image that he's created of her and everything she's going to do for him, I guess.
Yeah.
What she represents.
Yeah. It's like in this book, he's spending all this time ruminating in kind of a drug and grief induced rumination, right? Because he's in the pits because Gladys still not happy with his career. And he's like, the drugs are taking hold of him. And then she comes, and of course he's excited for a little bit, but then
Earl makes it sound like he just kind of shuts her away in Graceland. I mean, he's very careful to keep things proper, I guess. And got her in school. They're not physical as far as we know, and that seems to be a big thing for him.
Yeah.
Man, that blows my mind. I can't imagine like being Priscilla's parents and being okay with that.
I mean, you're right. There is something. The idea of just sending them off, especially like if you live in a different country. So I think her parents are still in Germany, right?
Right. And from this book, I don't know what went into it, but it just sounds like Elvis gets his mind set on it, and then it's basically like one long phone conversation, and then it's like, she's coming.
Yeah, that's happening.
That's just crazy.
Yeah. And you can't discount the fact that it was such different times.
Yeah.
And people's expectations and perspectives on things. And like the whole idea of like a major celebrity actually being like a sexual predator was like unheard of.
Yeah.
Like I think people like, oh, you're popular. Everyone knows you. You must be okay. Like literally. I mean, now we assume everyone is a sexual deviant. Like a violent sexual deviant.
Right.
Like a sex island somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Which is not probably any more correct than the other way around,
Yeah.
And also, back then, 14 wasn't that young.
That's true, too.
A whole different perspective on what young was,
Yeah.
So...
Or maybe she was just like getting way into Nazi memorabilia or something like that. Get her out of here. Get her something else to do.
It's either Nazi memorabilia or getting plugged by Elvis. Like, tough decisions.
Hey, Dad, check out this dagger I got.
Yeah.
Isn't it rad?
Look at that. That's dried blood. Yeah. Well, interesting. So, the one aspect of that I found really funny was that he gave her a bedtime. And so all the guys, they'd just be sitting around chatting, and they'd be like, 10 bills, Scylla. And then, he'd come over and she'd give him a kiss on the cheek, and then she'd go to bed.
Yeah.
And she had to lay in bed, listening to them all talking downstairs, like when your parents had a party when you were a kid.
Yeah.
It's like, what is going on? How fucking weird is that? How could Elvis even compartmentalize like that? Like, oh, you're my lover.
But you're also my like child.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
like an orphan child.
Yeah.
It's so strange.
Yeah.
Eat your greens, Scylla. Right?
Yeah.
Like literally making her sit there and like till she eats all her peas. Like that kind of shit. And then
Not
like,
leave this table.
yeah. And then trying to like smell her puss. Weird guy. Doesn't seem to add up. But yeah, by this book, he doesn't. I mean, that's the eternal question. And I don't know that I'll ever be fully satisfied. Either way, was Elvis truly, were they chased? And it's like, I don't know, this book seems to suggest they were.
Yeah.
And he makes the whole case about her being like Gladys reincarnated. And so he didn't want to touch her and all that.
Oh, man. Like, yeah, that makes it even weirder. Like,
Yeah.
she looks like these photos of my mom. I got to have her. Whoa.
Yeah. That is he's all mixed up emotionally, for
Yeah,
sure. Right?
yeah.
Because those are different feelings.
Yeah, one would hope.
So it could be a true thing. I mean, it would speak to the depth of his grief and inability to process that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Earl also puts himself, I thought it was interesting that he confirmed the claim made in Elvis What Happened, that about Elvis contracting a hit on Mike Stone. Mike Stone Must Die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, take this machine gun. Which I don't know. That always seemed like maybe that didn't happen.
It's within the realm of possibility for sure.
But it also, that anecdote kind of at the same time creates that as a realm of possibility. Like that single anecdote makes that a part of the Elvis character, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I guess that could actually work.
Yeah.
But Earl, so he says that happened, and then Earl puts himself in the center of thwarting this. Because it's like Earl catches wind that he's doing this. Like, I don't think Earl claims to have been in the room when the hit was initially ordered. That's so 70s of Elvis.
Yeah.
Like, ordering a hit. What an idiot. You must have just watched probably Godfather, right?
Yeah, or I bet he's reading like Soldier of Fortune. Soldier of Fortune. Like he's definitely like got a subscription. So like,
yeah, because he's absolutely reading karate magazines.
Oh yeah,
and those are the same readership. Like,
yeah,
all the ads in the back are all the same. So he would be seeing like studded gladiator wristbands and shit like that.
Yeah,
and like tactical batons,
right?
And voice throwing ventriloquist techniques. And all those 8mm smut reels you would buy, like Mysteries of Danish Sex. Yeah. So yeah, that would have led to the machine gun. That's definitely like the Soldier of Fortune choice of weapon, probably. Mm-hmm. Or maybe not the true one, but I think if you were interested in that world, you would think Soldier of Fortune like an M16.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas obviously a true Soldier of Fortune, as I'm sure we would hear from any out there listening, would be like, no, my friend.
Yeah.
Silent and deadly.
Right.
You know, one right in the cranium.
Yep.
Knife.
Yep.
Right? Up from this base, to the top
Oh,
of the
right.
spine.
Yep.
Into the cerebellum.
Or there's like 2 slices. You do hit them somewhere, and then you cut their throat. I don't know. We're getting too deep into this.
Well, we each have our own style. But yeah, so this one, Earl like hears word, and everyone's like freaking out, and Earl's like, "Calm down, everyone. I got this." And he's like, "Here's how we'll play it. Let Elvis think we're doing it.
Right.
And if I know Elvis, and I do because we're like brothers and we've been inseparable since birth, he will lose interest.
Right.
And so tell him that we are pursuing it and we found a guy. And I guarantee he will call it off at that point."
Right.
And of course he's right because he knows Elvis like the back of his hand.
Yep.
And that's why Elvis needs him so much. Sees his mirror.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Tell me about Jimmy Dean.
There's a story about Elvis pulling a gun on Jimmy Dean.
Yeah.
Jimmy Dean is visiting Elvis backstage, and in this book, Dean makes some sort of joke that Elvis takes poorly.
Yeah.
And then a gun is pulled.
Yeah.
This is a story that's also detailed in Elvis What Happened. I think here they talk about, I don't know, it's got something to do with a girl in this or something.
Yeah, there's a couple different versions I've read. One is definitely they're backstage, and there's a girl that's sort of with Elvis, and Jimmy Dean is maybe making a pass at her, or even like jokingly makes a pass.
Yeah.
And Elvis pulls a gun on him.
And I think in What Happened, Elvis gets mad because Jimmy Dean just kind of like jokingly remarks like, "Boy, you kept me waiting a long time there."
Yeah.
And Elvis doesn't like that.
Doesn't cotton to that
Yeah.
at all. Yeah.
So tries to put the fear of God in him, I guess.
Yeah. And by this book, I think it's either this book or as I looked to get this verified, I looked it up online and some other guy had a slightly different story. And I think it was the online version where he talks about Elvis pulls the gun and not only pulls the gun at him, but actually presses it against his head. But according to this author, still maintained a vibe of only like half joking, which is a delicate balance.
Yeah.
Cold steel against your temple.
Yeah.
Like, just randomly a guy like, there's just, it's so different to have it actually pressing against your skin.
Yeah.
It's like, we both like knives for our kills because of the intimacy.
Yes.
And he's bringing that intimacy to the gun.
Yeah.
Right? Is what he's doing. I think maybe that's it. It's very unnerving.
Right.
And a tough joke to pull off. Like, pretty crazy.
But I guess when you're as charismatic as Elvis, you can do it, right?
I think that's right. I don't get the impression Jimmy Dean had any great hard feelings over it.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, man, you sleep with lions. You're going to get pawed. Like, this is how it is. You know the deal on Elvis. I mean, I'm sure he just walks up. He's clinking from all the guns on him. Chink, chink, chink. Okay. I think this is interesting. Like, I've wondered in the past why Elvis didn't have more children.
Kids?
He had very traditional values. And it seems like multiple kids. He
Yeah.
seems like the kind of guy who would have that in his plans.
Yeah. I don't know. Unless he's modeling things on his own family situation where he was the only child. But then, I don't know, that gets complicated because he's not really the only child. There's, stillborn twin who's hovering over his shoulder at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Unless Priscilla was just like, no way. But I don't see her doing that either.
This book actually makes, as much as I don't really believe this book, it makes a pretty good case for why he didn't. In that he did have this weird, the Madonna whore thing with Scylla.
Yeah.
And he was banging on these other chicks. Mm-hmm. But he almost like, by Greenwood's telling, he kind of didn't even want to touch Priscilla.
Yeah.
And it almost sounds like they had sex the one time on their wedding night. He got her pregnant. And then she was a mother. And as we've discussed elsewhere, Greenwood claims that he was like,
ew.
Really icked out by mothers and
Yeah.
loose vaginas.
In Priscilla's case, I would see that not so much as him being grossed out by her and that notion, but just that like now not only is she pure Priscilla, but she's pure Priscilla who is the pure mother of my pure child. And he doesn't want to like sully that with his wiener.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if we ever get this story verified. But Earl talks about Elvis in the mid-70s when he's really in his decline, getting so looped out on drugs that he would go out in the middle of the night into the backyard at Graceland, get on his hands and knees, dig holes with a little like hand hoe, and bury jewelry and cash.
Yeah.
And then like put all the dirt back on it and kind of pat it back down.
Yeah.
Because he was worried about losing money or like things all falling apart, and he wanted to have his little savings
safety.
account.
Yeah.
Just loose money and loose like necklaces just dumped into more dirt thrown on top of it. And by Earl's telling, members of the Memphis Mafia with less integrity than others would watch this happen and then sneak out there after Elvis went in, passed out, and would dig him up, knowing that Elvis would never even remember he was out there in the first place. So
that's a great story.
It's
I really want that one to be true.
Oh, that's so cold. I feel so bad for him. Like I for some reason I just think about his cold, wet knees and him like going in, his knees are all wet.
Oh
and
yeah,
just, like grass stained and
he's wearing track pants and he's got like a dirty wife beater on and it's really sweaty.
Or he's just in his he famously has this like deep blue robe he would wear all the time. It's like him and like Ginger would always walk around in these like deep blue robes. Yeah, him just in his robe out there. It's so sad. I don't know. There's something about that like middle of the night, half out of it on drugs or drunk, feeling like this desperate need to try to correct something like at that right then.
Oh yeah.
It's really sad.
Yeah. I guess what tickles me about the story is just like envisioning these Memphis Mafia members like with their heads like peeking up over bushes and like around corners and like watching this go down. And instead of like thinking we should really help this guy, just like rubbing their hands and
yeah, that one's mine. You get the next one, Charlie. That was mine.
And then Elvis goes in and the two guys race for the same hole.
Yeah,
I got there first. You know the rules.
Yeah, like Sonny tackles Joe so that Red can get in there. God damn the West brothers. They're not brothers. West cousins.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a funky story. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if that crops up in anyone else's tellings.
Yeah.
You want it to be true. I don't want it to be true. I don't like all this. I want Elvis to be happy.
Yeah.
I don't like hearing that.
Well,
It's
when you
funny.
put it like that, now I feel bad.
You should feel bad. You should feel super bad. Okay. And so Greenwood also makes the claim that Greenwood and Elvis make these sex tapes, show them to all the boys, do some play-by-plays,
Yeah.
show off some blood spots, all the normal stuff. Somehow Parker, according to the Greenwood story, Parker gets a hold of these. And there's a part fairly early on where Elvis is like, I think this might even be in the 60s, where Elvis is like, that's it. Parker's gone. We're not doing this anymore. And he goes in, has a big, serious powwow with Parker, and he comes out just totally defeated.
Yeah.
And that's the end. No more spoke of it. And Elvis is just kind of defeated man from that
I feel
point
like that
on.
happens more than once in this book, where Elvis goes into a meeting all hot under the collar about something, and he comes out always like 10 minutes later, like a beaten puppy.
Yeah, tail between the legs,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. At that point, Elvis comes forward to Earl and says, like, Parker has a hold of our sex movies and has been using these as,
Leverage all this time.
yeah, forcing me to do whatever he wants to be his puppet. And that's why I can't get out from under his thumb.
I think that makes for a good story, but I don't necessarily buy it.
No.
Although I guess it's not beyond the realm of possibility, because after the story of these like sex reels that they make, just kind of like for a week, and who knows if there's more, they're just like doing this all the time, having orgies, filming them, and then it's just kind of like the film just kind of ended up in some drawer at Graceland or something.
Yeah.
And I could totally see the Colonel getting his hands on those and using them. Like, I wouldn't put that past him, but it also seems like, I know that the Colonel's a carny and he's kind of a scumbag, but I think he's a little classier than that too.
Yeah.
Like, he wouldn't have to resort to that.
That's how I see it. I don't think he needs such a blunt measure. I think he's
Yeah.
got, just by weaving tales and getting like into Elvis's head, he's already got him right where he wants him.
Yeah.
I don't think he needs something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, at some point, could Elvis just like send the boys in to like rough him up?
If it came, if that was the actual situation,
Yeah.
yeah, I imagine so. If Elvis like genuinely didn't want anything to do with Parker and that's what he had over him, like, yeah, I mean, Elvis was like gonna kill Mike Stone. I mean, he was running around with guns all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure at some point it would have come to a head. But they do talk about Elvis's trying to assert himself, trying to take control, and always being batted down by Parker and those around him, and him responding eventually by just almost giving up and just indulging in these hedonistic excesses, which psychologically makes sense. Like, I think we probably see that a lot with celebrities, because you do think like these people get to these situations where they're so successful, they have so much money that they can kind of do whatever they want, and yet the more success and money they get, the less they can do.
Right.
So it's this weird like reverse mechanism. And you have more and more people like around you that are relying on these decisions and like want to make decisions for you and probably know more about stuff. And like, yeah, at some point, yeah, you just like are no longer allowed to make your own decisions.
Right.
And you just become this puppet getting bounced around between people. But then you still have all the ego of being like, you are the most important person,
Yeah.
right? It is you that's the selling thing. You can't do anything. I can definitely see how you just like, well, at least I got zillions of dollars. I'll
Yeah.
just become this
Gotta
like,
blow off steam somehow.
yeah, and then just like drugs and dames and stuff. Pretty gnarly. So that's it. Let's talk about the feelings about the book. A little wrap up. Would you recommend this book to?
I would recommend this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the more distance I get from it, the greater I think it is. Like,
Really?
Yeah, because I think you've mentioned there is a lot of history of early Elvis here, which can be a bit of a snooze.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat to see that, just because I don't feel like it's been focused on a whole lot. It's pretty cursory in other stuff. I mean, it's been a while since I've read the Growlnick books,
Yeah.
so I'm sure you can get what you need there. But you get a better picture of what life was like for Elvis and the Presleys in Tupelo, which is kind of cool. And then just the stories are great. Like, the stories of Elvis as a celebrity are crazier. I mean,
Yeah.
just it comes down to like filming sex orgies. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
into this book.
There are some amazing, if you're in it for anecdotes, be they true or not, this is your book.
Yeah.
Because it does. It's got the sex orgies. It's got checking out panties.
Yep.
It's got the obsession with young girls.
Yeah, banging celebrities.
Celebrities.
There are a couple of pretty interesting Sinatra stories, like Elvis kind of moving in on Sinatra's girl, who's Juliet Prowse, and then Sinatra coming to have a talk with him.
Yeah.
And then Elvis, like, pretty much refusing to speak to Juliet Prowse after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then and going sleeping with Sinatra's daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get a lot. There's a lot of good juice in this. Too bad it's probably all pretty made up.
Yeah.
That's kind of the downside of this book, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think in terms of, like, do you think Earl Greenwood was actually a member of Elvis's entourage? Like, was he in any way involved with Elvis, or is this completely made up?
No, well, I guess I buy that he was a close family member. I buy that he would have served Elvis in some capacity as far as PR. I don't know. I totally believe that he, like, is opening Elvis's fan mail and going through it to report back to Elvis, but that might be as far as I take it.
So you think they did grow up together in Tupelo?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I believe they grew up together. I believe their relationship, as Earl describes it, is totally fabricated. Earl is Elvis's second cousin. He is a couple years younger than Elvis, and in pretty much every story Earl tells, he positions himself as kind of the wise, like, sage. Elvis is coming to him for advice, or he's offering advice to Elvis, and Elvis pretty much taking it. There's at least one story where he's teasing Elvis, and Gladys has to tell him, like, cut that off. Stop scaring my baby. Like, I don't buy that, especially at that young of an age, where a 2-year difference is so much bigger than it would be if you're in your teens or whatever. There's no way, like, a 4-year-old kid is scaring a 6-year-old kid.
Yeah, especially someone as headstrong as Elvis.
Yeah.
I think that's where we differ, because I think he's completely making this up. And to me, the real telling point is, like, this whole story that his mom is Vernon's secret sister, who no one knows of, shows up in any book because she had syphilis and she went crazy, and so they locked her away, and she's the big family secret. And so when people go, like, oh, wait, you're a cousin? Who are you? Who's your mom? And whatever he claims the mom's name is, they're like, well, this isn't in any known family tree. He goes, well, of course it's not, because they're ashamed of her.
Right.
Because she porked a guy and got syphilis, Caligula style. And then she had me somewhere in there. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
But that I just don't. I mean, I just don't buy it.
Man, you put it like that, and I just feel, like, super gullible.
Well, had you just kind of forgotten about that?
I'd kind of forgotten about that, but I didn't do a whole lot of there
Yeah.
was some confusion for me as far as the family tree goes, but maybe that's just because he went so far back in the telling of it. But yeah, you're right. Like, the family connections are very tenuous.
Yeah, I had to look it up. I mean, obviously he doesn't talk about that. I mean, he talks about the mom having syphilis. He explains his side of it, but and yeah, it's a situation where, I mean, there is no, if you're trying to find out what Earl Greenwood is doing nowadays, there is no information I saw. Like, he just vanished. And so you would think someone, and even if you type him in, it's not like he doesn't come up in searches like, oh, he's referenced in another book. He
Yeah.
never shows up,
Yeah.
which is pretty dubious.
I wonder if Earl Greenwood even exists.
It's a different name. Like a different name.
Well, because this is written by Earl Greenwood and Kathleen Tracy.
Oh, wow, Pat. So you're thinking she just made him up entirely? That's really an interesting theory.
It could be. I'm sure that's easily, that balloon's easily popped, but
I don't know. I think that's a very, very possible. Like I say, because there's no, you do a Google search for Earl Greenwood, there's nothing. And I actually want to amend what I said earlier. I think I'm kind of misremembering the family tree, but if they're saying second cousin, then it wouldn't have been Vernon's sister. I think it was
Right.
Vernon's dad's sister.
Yeah.
Who was the family secret.
Yep.
Either way, wherever that syphilis mother falls into, that's still the story. But yeah, so I think it's all fake, but like we've kind of said a number of times, I think my feeling is that I don't think this is truly Elvis. I don't think Elvis was this miserable and psychotic. I don't think he was such a priapic woman abuser. Mm-hmm.
This makes a lot of his resentment towards his parents, which doesn't track in a lot of other stuff that I've read.
Yeah, he really, like in this, he really does not like Vernon at all.
Yeah.
Which I don't hear that elsewhere.
He still loves his mama, but there's definitely, I don't know, there are times where she's seen as holding him back.
Yeah, he has it's a very complicated, unpleasant relationship with Gladys. She's like super manipulative and like a drunk, and she's got giant feet, and like she's just like manipulating Elvis. Now he's talking about his dead brother and just tormenting him, and she dies, and he has a mental breakdown he never recovers from. He's just miserable for the rest of his life and getting increasingly fucked up on drugs. And like, I don't want to believe any of that. I don't quite know why that's so important to me, that's not the truth, because it really affects me. And like, I don't like thinking of that when I'm listening to Elvis music.
Yeah.
Like, Elvis music is so comforting to me. And like, so like, I listen to 70s Elvis, and it just like, it's like being home for Christmas always. It's such a good feeling. So just like, I don't think it's true, and I don't want it to think it's true. You know?
I mean, I want the sex stuff to be true, I guess. But I am sympathetic to the portrayal of Vernon and Gladys being somewhat of an anchor, or like not an anchor, not in a good way. I see those two holding him back. Like, I don't know, you're going to love your parents no matter what. And there's no doubt they were huge figures in Elvis' life. But I do buy them as being kind of rubes who at times held him back. So I guess it's too much to say I want it to be true, but I could see how that was true. Yeah. Even if I don't buy it all the way.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, there's definitely like hints of truth. You know, it's no revelation to say the truth is obviously in between. It's not the beautiful portrayal that, you know, Elvis Presley Industries would like you to think.
Yeah.
You know, that's not really the story. Neither is the Greenwood story. I mean, there's definitely like human emotions and happenings in between. Which is probably accurate. And I think what you just said about the parents is probably somewhat, I think there are whiffs of that probably in his life, truly. I mean, I think, well, what you're saying, I do agree with. Like, on one hand, I don't think it's true. I don't want it to be true. But I can see that there is a good, strong internal logic to a lot of this book.
Yeah.
Like, psychologically, it could be true.
Right.
It doesn't seem just, like, completely random.
Yeah,
like, the motives they give him add up, right?
Yep.
So that is interesting. And I mean, as much as I don't want these stories to be the truth, they make for exactly what I want in an Elvis book.
Yeah.
Like, it makes for a great Elvis book.
Yeah, I agree.
Because that's what you want in a biography. You want the crazy anecdotes.
Yeah, some really juicy details.
Yeah. Jaw-dropping. That's what you want.
Right.
And, like, this book definitely delivers.
Yes.
It's a little quiet for the first, like, 100 pages. Then it ramps up. And then somewhere in, like, 249 or something, I had a note. It just, like, I think that's when the orgies start.
Yeah.
It just goes haywire. So, yeah, the psychology is good. If you're looking for a juicy Elvis book, I think it's right up there with Elvis What Happened for sure.
Yeah.
You want it to deliver, but yeah, you also don't want to be depressed by it.
Yeah.
So there's a certain balance
in
tone you're looking for. But yeah, so I don't know, out of 1,000, what would you give this book?
Oh, I give it a solid 900.
No, well, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I say that now after getting some distance. Like, actually reading the book be a little tougher than I'm making it out to be. Because with time, all the like boring details fade, and those really juicy stories really come to the surface in my mind. So it's good.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
I'm with you. I'm up there too. Just don't believe it. No, it's all fucking bullshit. That's it. That about covers it.
Yeah.
Before we go, let's note next week we're doing Is Elvis Alive by Gail Brewer-Giorgio. That comes on audio tape, which I'm pretty excited about. But before we go, let's make special mention of our cousin podcast, Suspicious Minds with Wade and Burl. They're good friends of ours. They're doing good work in the name of E.
Yes.
So give them a listen. How can folks get in touch with us, Pat?
If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at elvisbookclub@gmail.com, or you can give us a call and leave a message at 312-380-1114. Just be aware we may use your call in a future pod.
And having said that, we part, and we do so in the manner of all Elvis fans the world over by saying a few simple words. You know, Pat, there was a guy said one time, he said, you never stood in that man's shoes.
Or saw things through his eyes.
Or stood and watched with helpless hands.
While the heart inside you dies.
So help your brother along the way, no matter where he starts.
For the same God that made you, made him too. These men with broken hearts.
Good night.
And God bless.
Everybody's gone away.